We heard you bought the penthouse at Millennium Tower, so we are moving in to forgive you. My son and his wife announced standing on my doorstep with 6 Louis Vuitton trunks. They thought they were walking into a life of luxury funded by my retirement. But when the elevator doors finally opened on the 60th floor, they didn't find Italian marble or crystal chandeliers. They found the end of their lives as they knew it. Before I continue this story, please like and subscribe if you have ever had to deal with ungrateful family members who only show up when they smell money. Let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. It was 7 p.m. on a Tuesday, and the only thing in my glass was a $3 Merlot. I sat in my worn leather armchair, the one Beatrice bought at a yard sale 20 years ago, listening to the hiss of the radiator. The apartment was a 2-bedroom walk-up in a neighborhood that gentrification had forgotten. The paint was peeling in the corners and the floorboards groaned if you looked at them wrong. To the world, I was Silas Jefferson, a retired logistics manager living on a fixed pension, quietly fading away in the city. To the IRS, I was something very different. But that was a conversation for another day. The silence of my evening was shattered, not by a knock, but by a violent assault on the doorbell. It buzzed incessantly, a demanding rhythmic shrieking that set my teeth on edge. I set my glass down on a coaster because, unlike some people I respected would, regardless of how old it was. I walked to the door, my joints popping with the familiar stiffness of being 68 years old. When I opened the door, the hallway was filled with luggage, massive leather trunks with the monogram LV stamped all over them, stacked like a barricade. Behind the wall of expensive leather stood Tyson, my son, and Paige, my daughter-in-law. Tyson looked sweaty, his designer suit straining at the buttons around his midsection. Paige was scrolling on her phone, the light of the screen illuminating a face that had seen too much filler and not enough kindness. She didn't look up. She didn't say hello. She just nudged the nearest suitcase with the toe of a stiletto heel that cost more than my car. "Move aside, Silas." Paige said, her voice flat and bored. She pushed past me, trailing a cloud of heavy floral perfume that instantly overpowered the smell of my old books and lemon polish. She walked right into my living room, her eyes scanning the space with undisguised disgust. She kicked my house slippers under the sofa to clear a spot for her handbag, a Birkin that I knew was a high-quality fake. Tyson dragged the bags inside, grunting with the effort. He looked at me, and for a second I saw a flicker of shame, but it was quickly drowned out by entitlement. "We know, Dad," he huffed, wiping his forehead with a silk handkerchief. "We know about the penthouse." I stood by the open door, watching them invade my sanctuary. I didn't blink. I didn't ask how they knew. I simply closed the door and turned the deadbolt. "What penthouse?" I asked, my voice calm, the same tone I used to use when negotiating shipping contracts worth millions. Paige laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that grated on my nerves. "Don't play dumb, Silas. My friend works at the city registry. Silas Jefferson, Millennium Tower, the top floor unit, 5,000 square feet. You closed the deal yesterday. Cash." She walked over to my mantel, picking up a porcelain figurine Beatrice had loved and inspecting it for dust before putting it back down carelessly. "Finally, you did something smart with that hoard of cash you have been hiding." I walked back to my chair and sat down. I didn't offer them a drink. I didn't offer them a seat. "So you are here because I bought a property?" "No." Dad Tyson stepped forward, putting on his best salesman smile. "We are here to make peace. We forgive you." I looked at my son. This was the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the boy I had put through college working double shifts at the warehouse, the boy who 6 months ago had blocked my number because I refused to sell the house I built with his mother to fund his crypto mining startup. "You forgive me," I repeated slowly. "For what exactly?" Tyson waved his hand dismissively as if swatting away a fly. "For being stubborn. For not believing in my vision last year. Water under the bridge, Dad. We are family, and family takes care of each other. You are getting old. You shouldn't be alone in a massive penthouse. It is dangerous. You could fall. You could get confused." Paige chimed in from the kitchen, where she was already opening my refrigerator. "Exactly, Silas. A place like Millennium Tower needs maintenance. It needs management. We are willing to sacrifice our lifestyle to move in with you, to manage the estate, to ensure you are comfortable in your final years." I watched Paige pull out a container of leftover stew, sniff it with a grimace, and drop it into the trash can. That simple action, the casual wastefulness, made my blood run cold. They weren't here to manage anything. They were here to consume. I looked at the mountain of luggage again. 6 trunks. You don't bring 6 trunks for a visit. You bring 6 trunks when you have nowhere else to go. I knew the truth. They thought I was a senile old man sitting in a dark room, but they forgot that I spent 40 years in logistics. I knew how to track things. My lawyer, Mr. Sharp, had sent me a dossier at noon. Tyson and Paige hadn't decided to move in out of the goodness of their hearts. They had been evicted from their luxury condo in the financial district at 9 o'clock this morning. They were 4 months behind on rent. Their credit cards were maxed out. The leasing on Tyson's BMW was in default. They were homeless. They were desperate. And they saw me not as a father, but as a golden parachute. Tyson sat on the arm of my sofa, leaning in close. Look, Dad, we know you are lonely. Mom is gone. You are just sitting here rotting. Let us help you. We can turn that penthouse into a real home. Paige has great taste. She can decorate. We can host dinners. You can just relax and let us handle the finances. Handle the finances. That was the phrase that almost made me laugh out loud. Tyson couldn't handle a lemonade stand without bankrupting it. Paige walked back into the living room holding an apple she had found in the fruit bowl. She took a bite and chewed loudly. We need to talk about the layout, she said, talking with her mouth full. I looked up the floor plans online. The orange walls in the master suite have to go. It is tacky. We need to knock down the wall between the kitchen and the dining area. Open concept. It is better for my live streams. She was already remodeling a home she had never stepped foot in. She was already spending money she didn't have. I watched her walk around the room, touching my things with disdain. Her hip bumped into the small side table where I kept the small shrine to Beatrice. The silver frame with her wedding photo wobbled. I started to stand up, but I wasn't fast enough. The frame fell, hitting the hardwood floor. The glass shattered with a loud crack. The room went silent. Tyson looked at the floor, then at me. Paige didn't even look down. She just stepped over the shards. Oops, she said casually. Well, it was old anyway. The frame was tarnished. When we move to the penthouse, we will get you a digital frame. Much more modern. You can upload photos from the cloud. She didn't apologize. She didn't bend down to pick up the picture of the woman who had welcomed her into this family, who had cooked for her, who had tried to love her despite her coldness. I sat back down. My hand gripped the armrest of the chair so hard my knuckles turned white. I felt a piece of jagged glass from my broken heart slice into my resolve. This was it. This was the moment. For years I had made excuses for them. I told myself Tyson was just influenced by the wrong crowd. I told myself Paige was just young and misunderstood. I helped them in secret. I paid off credit cards they thought they had magically cleared. I anonymously bought the unsold inventory from Tyson's failed dropshipping business so he wouldn't feel like a failure. But looking at the shattered glass on the floor, I realized I hadn't been helping them. I had been enabling monsters. And monsters need to be fed or they need to be put down. I took a sip of my wine. The cheap Merlot tasted bitter like iron. I looked at Tyson, who was waiting for an answer, his eyes shifting nervously to the suitcases. He needed a yes. If I said no, they would be sleeping in their car tonight. I could kick them out. I could scream. I could tell them I knew about the eviction, about the debt, about the lies. But that would be too easy. That would be a mercy. And mercy was something Silas Jefferson had just run out of. I smiled. It was a small, tight smile that didn't reach my eyes. You are right, I said, my voice raspy. I am getting old. This apartment is, dingy. Tyson's shoulders dropped 2 inches. Relief washed over him. Exactly, Dad. It is depressing here. You deserve better. And you want to come with me? I asked. To the Millennium Tower. Yes, Paige said, stepping forward, her eyes gleaming like a predator spotting a wounded animal. We will take care of everything, Silas. You won't have to lift a finger. I looked at the shattered photo of Beatrice one last time. I promised her on her deathbed I would look out for our boy. I promised I would teach him to be a man. I had failed. But maybe it wasn't too late for a final lesson. Okay, I said, standing up. Really? Tyson asked, a grin breaking across his face. Yes. I will call my lawyer, Mr. Sharp. He handles the property. But there are conditions. Anything, Paige said. We go tomorrow morning, I said. I am tired. I want to sleep in my own bed one last time. You can stay here tonight. Sleep on the floor if you have to, but don't unpack those bags." Tyson laughed a loud, victorious sound. "Deal. We can sleep on the floor. It is just for one night. Tomorrow we are living the high life." Paige winked at Tyson. I saw it. It was a conspiratorial wink, a wink that said we got him. The old fool took the bait. I turned my back to them and walked toward my bedroom. I stepped carefully around the broken glass. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed a number I knew by heart. "Mr. Sharp," I whispered into the phone as I closed my bedroom door. "Yes, Silas," the lawyer answered on the first ring. "Prepare the paperwork." I said, my voice cold as the grave. "We have guests. Activate the protocol." Protocol Alpha. Mr. Sharp asked, his tone shifting from professional to intrigued. "No," I said, looking at the shadow of my son pacing in the living room, excited about a fortune that didn't exist in the way he thought. "Activate the transfer protocol, and make sure the penthouse is ready. Strip it. Strip it, Silas." Everything I said. Leave nothing but the walls. I hung up the phone and listened. Outside in the living room, Paige was already on the phone, probably bragging to her friends. Tyson was opening my liquor cabinet. They thought they had won the lottery. They didn't know they had just bought a ticket to hell, and I was going to be the conductor. Tomorrow was going to be a very long day. The silence in my apartment did not last long. It was replaced by the aggressive clatter of cupboard doors slamming shut and the crinkle of plastic packaging being torn open. I sat in my armchair, the leather groaning under my weight, and watched Paige dismantle my kitchen. She moved through the small space like a health inspector looking for a violation, her nose wrinkled in permanent distaste. She opened my refrigerator, the seal popping with a sound that felt like a violation of my privacy. I watched her perfectly manicured hand reach inside and pull out a container of collard greens I had slow-cooked just yesterday. It was a recipe Beatrice had perfected over 30 years, a blend of spices and smoked turkey that made the house smell like comfort. Paige sniffed it, gagged theatrically, and tossed the entire container into the trash can. It hit the bottom with a wet thud. "Silas, you cannot be eating this slop," she declared, not even looking at me as she grabbed a jar of pickles and a block of cheddar cheese, throwing them in after the greens. "This is full of sodium and preservatives. If we are going to live together in the penthouse, we need to establish some ground rules about diet. My brand is all about wellness and clean living. I cannot have my followers seeing processed garbage in the background of my stories." I gripped the armrests of my chair. That food was my dinner for the next 3 days, but I said nothing. I let the anger simmer low in my gut, heating the blood in my veins. She turned to Tyson, who was sprawled on my sofa scrolling through his phone. "Babe," she said, her voice taking on that whine that sounded like a drill. "When we get to the Millennium Tower, we need to gut the kitchen immediately." I saw the floor plans. "The lighting is terrible for my morning smoothie tutorials. We need to knock down the north wall. I want floor-to-ceiling windows and a marble island. White marble. Not this cheap laminate Silas has." She tapped my countertop with a long acrylic fingernail. It made a clicking sound like a beetle skittering across wood. "We can turn the second bedroom into my studio," she continued, pacing the length of my small kitchen as if measuring it for a coffin. "I need soundproofing and a ring light setup. The view from the penthouse will be the perfect backdrop. My engagement numbers will skyrocket. We are going to be famous Tyson, the Jefferson family brand." She was already spending my money. She was already tearing down walls in a home she had never stepped foot in. She was planning a future built on the foundation of my bank account without ever asking if I wanted to be part of it. She saw me not as a person, but as a wallet with a pulse, a wallet that needed to be emptied and then discarded. I looked at Tyson. He wasn't listening to her. He was staring at me, his eyes shifting nervously. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. It was crumpled and stained with what looked like coffee. He placed it on the coffee table between us and pushed it forward with a trembling finger. "Dad," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "before we move, there is something we need to clear up. Just some housekeeping. You know, so we can start fresh." I looked at the envelope. The paper was thin and I could see the red ink bleeding through from the documents inside. I didn't need to open it to know what it was. I had spent 40 years in logistics. I knew what a final notice looked like. "What is this, Tyson?" I asked, keeping my voice level. He rubbed the back of his neck, refusing to meet my eyes. "It is just some temporary debt. Bad luck, really." The market turned on me. The crypto investments crashed and the dropshipping business had some supply chain issues. It is not my fault. I reached out and took the envelope. I opened it slowly. The papers slid out a cascade of financial failure. Past due notices from Visa, a repossession warning for the BMW, an eviction notice from their landlord, a final demand from a personal loan shark. I did the math in my head as I flipped through the pages. $40,000 on credit cards, $20,000 on the car, $12,000 in back rent, $8,000 to a private lender, $80,000, $80,000 of consumer debt, $80,000 of trying to look rich while being broke. This is a lot of bad luck, I said, tossing the papers back onto the table. Tyson flinched. I know, Dad, but it is manageable, especially now. With your new assets, this is pocket change, right? I mean, you just bought a penthouse for cash. 80 grand is nothing to you. He leaned forward, his eyes pleading. If you clear this for us tonight, we can move into the tower with a clean slate. No creditors calling the new landline. No repo men showing up in the lobby. It would be embarrassing for you, Dad. We need to protect the family name. Protect the family name. The audacity of it almost made me laugh. He wasn't worried about my reputation. He was worried about his own. He wanted me to wipe his backside like I did when he was a baby, only now the mess cost $80,000. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the weakness in his jaw, the entitlement in his posture. I had created this. I had shielded him from the world, and in doing so, I had crippled him. You want me to pay this? I asked. We are partners now, Silas Page interjected, walking out of the kitchen with an apple she had found in my fruit bowl. She took a bite, chewing loudly. It is an investment in our future. We are going to be taking care of you. It is only fair you take care of our overhead. It is a business transaction, really. A business transaction. My life, my legacy reduced to a transaction. She walked past the small side table near the window. On it sat the silver-framed photograph of Beatrice. It was my favorite picture of her taken on our 25th anniversary. She was laughing, her head thrown back, her eyes full of light. It was the most valuable thing in this apartment. Paige stopped. She looked at the photo, then at the rest of the room. She frowned. This energy is all wrong, she muttered. She reached out and picked up the frame. She didn't hold it with reverence. She held it by the corner like it was a dirty rag. This old stuff, she said, gesturing with the photo. It is so heavy, so dark. It is bad feng shui, Silas. You are holding on to dead energy. If we are going to live together, we need to clear this out. New beginnings mean letting go of the past. Put that down, I said. My voice was low, a warning growl. Paige rolled her eyes. Don't be so sentimental. It is just a picture. You can scan it and put it on an iPad. Keeping shrines to dead people is creepy. It blocks the flow of abundance. She went to set it back down, but she didn't look. She was looking at me, challenging me, smirking with the arrogance of someone who thinks they have already won. She missed the edge of the table. The frame slipped from her fingers. It seemed to fall in slow motion. I lunged forward, but I was 68 years old and my knees were stiff. I was too slow. The frame hit the hardwood floor face down. The sound of shattering glass was sharp and final, like a gunshot in the small room. No! I roared. I fell to my knees, ignoring the pain in my joints. I reached for the picture. My hand trembled. Paige stepped back, looking down at the mess she had made. She didn't gasp. She didn't apologize. She just shrugged. Oops, she said, her voice devoid of any real regret. Well, like I said, bad energy. It probably wanted to break. It is a sign, Silas. Out with the old. Tyson didn't move from the sofa. He just watched, chewing on his thumbnail. I turned the frame over. The glass was spiderwebbed, 1,000 jagged cracks obscuring Beatrice's smiling face. A shard of glass had pierced the photo right through her heart. I felt a heat rise in my chest, hot and consuming. It wasn't just anger, it was hatred. Pure, unadulterated hatred for these two parasites I had invited into my home. I reached out to brush the glass away from Beatrice's face. A sharp edge sliced into my thumb. I watched the blood well up dark and red. It dripped onto the broken glass, mixing with the dust on the floor. The sting of the cut cleared my head. It sharpened my focus. Paige was right. It was a sign. It was a sign that the time for mercy was over. I clenched my fist, letting the glass dig deeper into my palm. I needed the pain. I needed it to remind me of who I was dealing with. I stood up slowly. I didn't look at the photo again. I looked at Paige. She was already bored, picking at her cuticles. I pulled my phone from my pocket. My thumb left a smear of blood on the screen. I dialed Mr. Sharp. He answered on the first ring. Silas. Activate the transfer protocol, I said. My voice was steady cold as the bottom of the ocean. There was a pause on the other end. Mr. Sharp knew what that meant. It meant nuclear option. It meant no turning back. Are you sure, Silas? I looked at Paige, who was now complaining to Tyson about the lack of Wi-Fi. I looked at the red bills scattered on the table. I looked at the blood dripping from my hand onto my floorboards. I have never been more sure of anything in my life, I said. Do it. Prepare the papers for tomorrow morning. They are ready to sign. I hung up. Tyson looked up, hopeful. Was that the lawyer? Is he handling the debt? I looked at my son. I smiled. It was a wolf's smile. Yes, I said. He is handling everything. Tomorrow, all your problems will be solved. Tyson pumped his fist. Yes, I knew you would come through, Dad. Paige clapped her hands. Finally. Now let's order some real food. I am starving, and I cannot eat anything in this dump. They celebrated. They laughed. They planned their new life in my penthouse. They didn't know that I had just signed their execution order. They didn't know that the transfer protocol wasn't about transferring money to them. It was about transferring their liability to me and then using it to crush them. I looked at my bleeding hand. The blood was a promise. Beatrice was gone, but I was still here. And I was going to make sure that when they fell so hard they would never climb back up. Tomorrow they would enter the penthouse, and tomorrow the trap would snap shut. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting long bars of light across the hardwood floor where the shattered glass still lay. I had swept it into a pile but left it there, a jagged monument to the previous night. I needed the reminder. I needed to remember that my wife's memory meant nothing to these people. I sat at the kitchen table nursing a cup of black coffee. My hand rested on a blue booklet. It was a savings passbook from First National. Mr. Sharp and I had prepared it months ago as a contingency, a prop for a play I hoped I never had to stage. The balance printed on the last line read $5 million. It was a fake. A flawless counterfeit produced by a man who used to forge shipping manifests for the Port Authority back in the 90s. I heard the bedroom door open. Paige emerged wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than my first car. She looked around the living room, her face twisted in a sneer until her eyes landed on the table. She saw the blue book. I saw the change happen in real time. It was like watching a predator smell blood in the water. Her posture straightened. The sneer vanished, replaced by a wide, glossy smile that showed too many teeth. She walked over, her hips swaying with exaggerated grace. "Good morning, Silas," she cooed. Her voice was an octave higher than it had been last night. She placed a hand on my shoulder, her fingers digging into my muscle. I didn't look up. I just took a sip of my coffee. "Good morning, Paige." She sat down opposite me, her eyes glued to the passbook. "I see you are reviewing your finances. That is so smart. You have to stay on top of things, especially with the move today." I pushed the book slightly toward her. "Just checking the liquidity," I said casually. "Making sure I have enough for the renovations you wanted." She opened it. She didn't ask. She just reached out and flipped it open. Her eyes widened. I saw the reflection of the numbers in her pupils. $5 million. "Oh, Silas," she breathed. This is wonderful. You have been holding out on us." I shrugged. "I saved a little here and there. Logistics pays well if you know how to manage the inventory." She closed the book and slid it back to me. Her hand lingered on mine. Her skin was cold. "You know, Silas, I feel terrible about last night," she said. "I was tired. Stress does terrible things to a person. I didn't mean to be so harsh about the apartment. I just want you to be happy. You deserve the best." The transformation was sickening. 5 minutes ago, I was an old fool living in a dump. Now I was a king, and she was the loyal subject ready to serve. "Let me make you some tea," she said, standing up. "Coffee is bad for your blood pressure. I have some special herbal blend in my bag. It is great for relaxation. You look tense." I watched her go to her bag, one of the 6 trunks blocking my hallway. She rummaged around her back to me. I saw her pull out a small tin and something else, a small vial. She went to the stove. She bustled around humming a tune. She was blocking my view of the kettle with her body. I knew who Paige was. I knew her history. Tyson thought he had met a model at a launch party. I knew he had met a disgraced nurse who lost her license 3 years ago. Mr. Sharp had run the background check before the wedding. Diversion of narcotics. stealing pain meds from post-op patients. She knew her way around chemicals. She knew how to make people sleep. And she knew how to make people stop breathing if she had to. "Here you go, Dad," she said, using the word dad for the first time ever. She placed the mug in front of me. The steam rose, carrying a scent that cut through the smell of my coffee. It was floral, but underneath there was something sharp, bitter, like crushed almonds. I looked at the tea. Then I looked at her. She was watching me intently, her hands clasped in front of her waiting. "Drink up," she urged. "It will help you with the stress of the move." My heart hammered against my ribs. She wasn't just greedy. She was dangerous. She wanted me compliant. She wanted me pliable for whatever papers Tyson was about to bring out. Or maybe she just wanted me gone sooner rather than later. I lifted the mug. Her eyes tracked the movement. "Oh, I forgot my reading glasses," I said, suddenly setting the mug back down with a clatter. I stood up and walked toward the window where my fern sat on the sill. It was a large leafy plant I had kept alive for 10 years. Paige turned to look at the hallway where Tyson was emerging, rubbing sleep from his eyes. In that split second while her head was turned, I poured the entire contents of the mug into the soil of the fern. I turned back, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand. "That was delicious, Paige," I lied. "I feel better already." She smiled, satisfied. "Good. Now sit down. Tyson has something to show you." Tyson walked over holding a blue folder. He looked less confident than Paige, but he was driven by the same hunger. He sat down and placed the folder on the table next to the fake bank book. "Morning, Dad," he said. "Look, since we are moving today, we need to handle some logistics." I sat down. I let my eyelids droop slightly, acting as if the imaginary tea was already taking effect. "What kind of logistics, son?" He opened the folder. Inside was a document thick with legal jargon. At the top, in bold letters, it read, "Temporary Asset Management and Power of Attorney." "It is just a formality," Tyson said, pushing a pen toward me. "Since the Penthouse is a big property and there are taxes and fees, it will be a headache for you. This just lets me and Paige handle the paperwork. You know, talk to the lawyers, sign for deliveries, that kind of thing. It saves you the stress." I looked at the document. I didn't need to read the fine print to know what it was. It wasn't about deliveries. It was a total transfer of control. It would give them the right to access my accounts, sell my property, and make medical decisions on my behalf. If I signed this, they wouldn't need to wait for me to die. They could strip me clean by noon and dump me on the street by dinner. Paige moved behind my chair. Her hands rested on my shoulders, massaging them. "Just sign it, Silas," she whispered. "Trust us. We are family." I looked at Tyson. He was sweating. His leg was bouncing under the table. He knew this was wrong, but he was too weak to stop it. He was a man who would sell his own father to keep his wife in designer shoes. I reached for the pen. My hand trembled. I wasn't acting. The rage inside me was making me shake. "Okay," I said, my voice quavering. "If you think it is best." "Yes, Dad," Tyson said, leaning forward eagerly. "It is best. Just sign right there at the bottom." I brought the pen to the paper. I felt their anticipation. It was a physical weight in the room. They were already spending the $5 million in their heads. I pressed the tip of the pen to the paper. Then I let my hand spasm. I jerked my arm violently, knocking over the inkwell I kept on the table for my calligraphy hobby. The black ink exploded across the table. It soaked the document, turning the white paper into a black, sodden mess. It dripped onto Tyson's pants. "Oh no!" I cried, dropping the pen. My clumsy hands. "I am so sorry." Tyson jumped up, cursing. "Damn it, Dad. Look at my suit." Paige let out a hiss of frustration. "You old fool," she muttered under her breath. I stood up, clutching my chest, playing the part of the confused geriatric. "I am sorry. I don't know what happened. I feel so dizzy." Maybe it was the tea. Paige froze. She looked at me sharply, searching my face for any sign that I knew. "We need to print another one," Tyson snapped, trying to dab the ink off his trousers with a napkin. "We don't have a printer here," Paige said, her voice tight. "We have to go to a copy shop," Tyson said. I sat back down, breathing heavily. "I can't sign anything now," I said. "My eyes are blurry. I need to rest. We can do it tomorrow. We can go to Mr. Sharp's office in the morning. He has all the papers." Tyson looked at Paige. They exchanged a silent conversation. They were calculating. They assessed the risk. "Fine," Paige said, her lips a thin line. "Tomorrow." But first thing in the morning, Silas. Before we go to the tower. I nodded, closing my eyes. Yes. First thing. I heard them move away. I heard them walk down the hallway toward the bathroom. They thought I was asleep. They thought the sedative was working. I stood up silently. I moved across the living room, my socks sliding on the wood. I pressed my ear against the bathroom door. "Can you believe him?" Paige whispered, her voice full of venom. "He ruined the papers." "It is fine," Tyson replied. "We will get him to sign at the lawyer's office. Once he signs, we are in control." "But what do we do with him?" Paige hissed. "I am not living in that penthouse with him drooling all over the furniture. He is disgusting." Tyson laughed, a low, cruel sound. "Don't worry, babe. I already made the call. There is a facility in the Bronx. Shady Pines or something. It is state-funded. Cheap. Once the ink is dry on that power of attorney, we drop him off. We tell everyone he had a stroke and needs specialized care. He will be out of our hair by the weekend. They weren't just going to rob me, they were going to discard me. They were going to throw me into a warehouse for the dying while they drank champagne in my home." I stepped back from the door. A cold calm settled over me. It was the same calm I felt before closing a deal that would crush a competitor. They wanted to play games. They wanted to use legal documents and chemical cocktails. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I wasn't just an old man. I was the man who survived the riots of '92. I was the man who built an empire from a delivery van. I walked back to my chair. I looked at the fern in the window. The leaves where I had poured the tea were already starting to curl and brown. The poison was potent. I sat down and waited for them to come out. Tomorrow I would sign their papers, but they wouldn't be the papers they expected, and the ride to the penthouse wouldn't be the victory lap they imagined. It was going to be a funeral procession, and they were the ones in the hearse. At 9 o'clock sharp, a black stretch limousine turned the corner onto my street. It looked like a shark swimming in a koi pond. The vehicle was so long it blocked the driveway of Mrs. Higgins next door, who was out walking her poodle. She stopped and stared, her mouth hanging open. In this neighborhood, a car like that usually meant a funeral or a drug bust. I stood on the curb with my single leather satchel. Behind me, Tyson and Paige struggled with their mountain of Louis Vuitton trunks. They had refused my offer to help, and they refused to tip the driver who got out to load them. "Oh my God!" Paige shrieked, her voice pitching up to that frequency that shattered glass. "It is here! Tyson, look, your dad actually came through." She didn't look at me. She looked at the car. She pulled out her phone instantly. I watched her face transform. The boredom and disdain vanished, replaced by a bright manufactured joy. She held the phone up high, finding her angle. "Hey guys," she chirped into the screen. "Big day today. The Jefferson family is on the move. My father-in-law sent the private driver to pick us up. We are heading to the new estate at Millennium Tower. Stay tuned for the house tour." She lied as easily as she breathed. Private driver. Estate. She was building a narrative where she was the queen, and I was just the financier in the background. The driver, a man named Marcus, who I had hired specifically for his imposing size, held the back door open. Paige practically dove inside, dragging Tyson with her. I moved to follow them, but Paige stopped me. Her hand shot out, blocking the entrance. "Actually, Silas," she said, her smile tight and fake for the benefit of the neighbors watching. "Why don't you sit up front with the driver? There is way more legroom. Plus, Tyson and I need to coordinate some logistics for the arrival. We have to make calls. You would just be bored." She didn't want me in the back. She didn't want the old man in his dated suit ruining her aesthetic. She wanted the back seat to herself so she could drink the champagne and pretend she owned the world. I looked at her. I looked at Tyson, who was already popping the cork on a bottle of Cristal that had been waiting in the ice bucket. He didn't even look at me. He was too busy looking at the leather seats. "Fine," I said. I closed the back door and walked to the front. Marcus opened the passenger door for me. I climbed in. The seat was comfortable, but the message was clear. I was staff. I was the baggage handler. As we pulled away from the curb, leaving my old life behind, I heard the electronic thumping of bass coming from the partition behind me. They were having a party celebrating my demise. We navigated through the city traffic, the limousine parting the sea of Toyotas and Fords. I stared out the window, watching the buildings get taller and shinier. We were moving from the reality of the working class to the fantasy of the elite. Suddenly, the partition glass slid down. Tyson's face appeared. He looked flushed. The champagne was already hitting him. "Hey, Dad," he said, shouting over the music. "I need your phone." I turned in my seat. Why do you need my phone, son? Tyson held out his hand, snapping his fingers impatiently. We need to set up the apps, Dad. The banking apps, the crypto wallets. Mr. Sharp said the transfer protocols require two-factor authentication. I want to make sure everything is secure before we get to the tower. You know how hackers are these days. He was trying to sound professional, but I heard the greed dripping from his words. He wanted access. He wanted to see the numbers. He wanted to transfer my life savings into his account before we even parked the car. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. Tyson's eyes tracked my hand, his tongue darting out to wet his lips. I pulled out my phone. It wasn't the smartphone they expected. It wasn't a sleek glass rectangle. It was a Nokia 3310. A gray brick of a phone that I had kept in a drawer since 2005. I had reactivated it this morning just for this moment. I dropped the heavy plastic brick into Tyson's outstretched hand. Here you go, I said. Tyson stared at the phone. He turned it over in his hand as if I had handed him a piece of moon rock. What is this? He asked, his voice flat. It is a phone, I replied, facing forward again. It makes calls. It sends texts. It has a battery that lasts a week. Very secure. Impossible to hack. Dad, Tyson stammered. I can't install a banking app on this. This is ancient technology. Where is your real phone? The one with the internet. I tapped my temple. The internet is in my head, son, and the money is in the cloud. Mr. Sharp handles the digital interface. I just approve the transactions. Tyson looked panicked. He looked back at Paige, who was frowning. Well, how do we access it? Paige demanded, leaning over Tyson's shoulder. How do we see the balance? You call the automated line, I said. Speed dial 1. Tyson hurriedly pressed the button. He put the phone to his ear. I heard the robotic voice on the other end. Welcome to the Jefferson Trust automated system. Please enter your 6-digit security PIN. It is asking for a PIN, Tyson said. What is the PIN, Dad? I looked at him in the rearview mirror. I looked at the son I had raised, the son who had forgotten everything I taught him. The PIN, I said, my voice soft but carrying over the music, is the date of your mother's death. Month, day, year. Tyson froze. His thumb hovered over the keypad. He looked at the ceiling. He looked at Paige. He looked at his watch. There was a long, agonizing silence. He didn't know. He didn't know the day his own mother died. The woman who had rocked him to sleep. The woman who had saved every drawing he ever made. He started to guess. He pressed a few buttons. Incorrect PIN, the robotic voice said. He tried again. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Incorrect PIN. 1 attempt remaining. Date of the funeral. Paige whispered. Try the funeral. He didn't know that either. I reached back and plucked the phone from his hand. Never mind, I said. I will handle it later. You seem to be having trouble with the security questions. I slid the glass partition back up, cutting off their protests. I sat there, clutching the old phone, my heart feeling like a stone in my chest. He had forgotten her. He had erased Beatrice from his mind to make room for luxury brands and social media followers. That was the final seal on his fate. If he had remembered, if he had just shown 1 ounce of respect for his mother, I might have hesitated. I might have left him a lifeboat. But now he was going down with the ship. 10 minutes later, the limousine slowed. We were entering the financial district. The shadows of the skyscrapers fell over the car. The partition slid down again. This time it was Paige. Silas, she hissed. I turned. Yes, Paige. She was pointing a manicured finger at me. Her face was twisted in horror. You cannot walk into the Millennium Tower wearing that. I looked down at my suit. It was a charcoal gray wool suit. It was 10 years old, but it was clean. It was the suit I wore to church. It was the suit I wore to bury my wife. What is wrong with it? I asked. It is shiny, Paige said, her voice filled with disgust. The elbows are shiny. The lapels are too wide. It looks like you bought it at a thrift store. You look like the help Silas. You look like the janitor. I brushed a piece of lint from my knee. I am who I am, Paige. The suit does not make the man. No, but the suit makes the impression, she snapped. We are going to be living in the most exclusive building in the city. There are billionaires in that lobby, tech moguls, celebrities. I cannot have you walking in there looking like you. She reached through the partition. She had a wet wipe in her hand, one of those lemon-scented ones she used to clean her phone screen. Come here, she ordered. You have dandruff on your shoulder. It is disgusting. She started to scrub at the shoulder of my jacket. She rubbed hard as if trying to erase the fabric itself. She looked at me with such contempt, such utter revulsion. To her, I was a stain. I was a blemish on her perfect picture. "Hold still," she muttered, scrubbing harder. "You are making a mess of everything." I sat there and let her do it. I let her treat me like a dirty child. I let her wipe me down with a wet napkin. Because we were turning the corner. I looked out the windshield. The Millennium Tower rose into the sky, a needle of glass and steel piercing the clouds. It was magnificent. It was imposing. And standing in front of the massive revolving doors, waiting for us with a clipboard and a smile that could cut glass, was Mr. Sharp. "That is enough, Paige," I said, pushing her hand away. She dropped the dirty wipe on the floor of the car. "Just try not to talk to anyone," she warned. "Let Tyson and me handle the staff. You just stand in the back and look quiet." The car stopped. The driver killed the engine. We had arrived. I opened my door. The air smelled of money and exhaust. I stepped out onto the sidewalk. I straightened my shiny jacket. I adjusted my wide lapels. I looked up at the tower. 60 floors of hubris. Tyson and Paige spilled out of the back of the limo. They looked up too. Mouths open, eyes wide with greed. They saw a palace. I saw a prison. "Welcome home," I whispered. Mr. Sharp walked toward us, his shoes clicking on the pavement. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now all we had to do was close the door. The revolving doors of the Millennium Tower spun with a hushed, expensive whoosh, pushing us from the grid of the street into a sanctuary of climate-controlled privilege. The lobby smelled of white tea and old money. The ceilings soared 30 feet high, supported by pillars of black marble that looked like they had been hewn from the night sky itself. My shoes, the ones Paige had tried to scrub clean, squeaked against the polished floor. It was the only sound that betrayed we didn't belong here. Mr. Sharp was waiting for us by the concierge desk, standing tall and immaculate in a navy pinstripe suit that cost more than Tyson's entire wardrobe. He didn't look like a lawyer today. He looked like the gatekeeper to Olympus. He held a clipboard against his chest like a shield. "Welcome home, Mr. Jefferson Sharp," said his voice smooth as aged bourbon. "We have been expecting you. The staff is eager to ensure your transition to the penthouse is seamless." He extended a hand to me, but before I could take it, Paige stepped between us. She thrust her Louis Vuitton tote bag toward him, not realizing or perhaps not caring that he was a senior partner at the city's top law firm and not a bellhop. "Take this," she commanded without even making eye contact, "and have someone bring up the trunks from the curb, carefully. If I see a single scratch on that leather, heads will roll. Also, we need a bottle of Dom Perignon on ice immediately. The vintage stuff, not the swill you serve to the tourists." Sharp didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He simply looked at the bag, then at me. His eyes held a flicker of amusement that only I could see. "I am the building manager, ma'am," Sharp said politely, stepping back so her bag remained hanging in the air. "The porters will handle your luggage shortly. However, before we can grant access to the elevators, there are some administrative matters to attend to." Paige huffed, dropping her arm. "Well, hurry up. The light is perfect right now, and I need to film the entry for my followers. We are already behind schedule because of that ridiculous limousine ride." Tyson was spinning in a slow circle, his mouth slightly open, staring at the abstract chandelier that looked like a frozen explosion of gold shards. "Dad, this place is insane," he whispered. "Do you really own the top floor?" I nodded, keeping my face impassive. "It is a significant investment, son. That is why Mr. Sharp is here, to make sure everything is in order." Sharp gestured toward the massive reception desk, a slab of quartz that looked like a sacrificial altar. He placed a document on the surface. It landed with a heavy thud that echoed in the quiet lobby. It wasn't a single sheet of paper. It was a bound manuscript thick as a Bible. The cover simply read, "Residency and Liability Transfer Agreement. Since the deed is in your father's name, but you two will be the primary occupants assisting him, we need to formalize your status as residents," Sharp explained. "This ensures you have key fob access, amenity privileges, and authorization to make decisions regarding the property maintenance." Tyson looked at the stack of paper and his face fell. He hated reading. He hadn't finished a book since high school, and even then I was pretty sure he just watched the movie. "Do we have to read all of that?" Tyson asked, reaching for the corner of the document. "Can't we just sign? We trust you, Dad." I leaned against the marble pillar, feigning the exhaustion of an old man. It is standard procedure, Tyson. High security building. They need to know who is coming and going. Mr. Sharp is very thorough. Sharp flipped the document open. The pages were dense with legal text, single-spaced, justified margins printed in a font small enough to cause a migraine. It was 50 pages of ironclad clauses, traps, and financial landmines. It essentially states that as the active residents managing the household, you accept full responsibility for the operational costs and liabilities associated with the unit, Sharp said, glossing over the lethal details with the skill of an assassin. It grants you full autonomy within the residence. Paige heard the words full autonomy and her ears practically perked up. She didn't hear operational costs. She didn't hear liabilities. She only heard that she was going to be the queen of the castle. She elbowed Tyson out of the way. "Move over," she snapped. "You read too slow. We are going to be here all night." She grabbed the document and flipped to the back page. She didn't even glance at the text. She didn't look at the clauses regarding the massive lien on the property or the variable interest rate debt service that was currently accruing at a rate of $5,000 a day. "Where do we sign?" she asked, clicking a gold pen she had pulled from her purse. Sharp pointed to a line at the bottom. "Right there, Mrs. Jefferson." And there, under the section marked Primary Guarantor, Paige signed her name with a flourish, a big looping signature that took up half the page. She signed it like she was giving an autograph. She signed it like she was claiming a prize. She shoved the document toward Tyson. "Sign it, babe. Right next to mine." Tyson hesitated. He looked at the thick stack of paper. "Dad, are you sure about this?" he asked, looking at me. "Shouldn't you sign? It is your house." I coughed, a dry rattling sound covering my mouth with a handkerchief. "My hands are shaking, son," I wheezed. "The arthritis. Besides, you said you wanted to handle the logistics. You said you wanted to take care of me." Paige glared at him. "Tyson just signed the damn paper. Do you want the keys or not?" Tyson looked at me, then at Paige, then at the golden elevator doors waiting in the distance. Greed warred with laziness in his eyes, and greed won. It always won with him, always. He picked up the pen. He didn't read a single word. He didn't see the paragraph that transferred $2 million of toxic debt directly onto his personal credit history. He didn't see the clause that waived his right to bankruptcy protection. He signed his name, Tyson Jefferson. I watched the ink settle into the paper. It looked black and wet like fresh tar. "Thank you," Sharp said, snatching the document away before Tyson could second-guess himself. He slipped it into his briefcase with a snap of the locks that sounded like a jail cell closing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 black key cards. They were sleek and heavy, devoid of any markings except for the gold infinity symbol of the Millennium Tower. "Here you are," Sharp said, handing them to Paige. "Access granted. Penthouse suite, 60th floor. The private elevator is the 3rd one on the left." Paige snatched the keys from his hand. Her eyes were wide, manic with triumph. She didn't say thank you. She grabbed Tyson's hand. "Come on," she squealed, pulling him toward the elevators. "Let's go. I want to see the view before the sun sets." They ran. They actually ran across the lobby, their footsteps echoing, leaving me standing there by the desk. They didn't look back to see if I was coming. They forgot about me the moment the plastic touched their palms. I stood there for a moment watching them go. I felt a strange hollowness in my chest. It wasn't regret, it was the finality of it. The last thread of hope that my son might redeem himself had just been severed by a ballpoint pen. Mr. Sharp looked at me. His professional mask slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing a deep sadness. "It is done, Silas," he said softly. "The liability transfer is immediate. The moment they enter the unit, the debt activation clause triggers." I nodded. "Good work, Sharp." "Are you sure you want to go up there?" he asked. "It is going to be ugly." I straightened my jacket. I adjusted my cuffs. "I have to go up there," I said. "I promised them a tour, and I always keep my promises." I walked toward the elevators. My steps were measured and slow. I wasn't rushing. I knew exactly what was waiting for them up there. They thought they were ascending to heaven. They didn't realize the elevator was going straight down. As the doors of the private lift slid open, I stepped inside. The interior was mirrored. I looked at my reflection. An old man in a cheap suit. A father who had just destroyed his son. But as the lift began to rise, I didn't see an old man. I saw a general. And the war was just beginning. The elevator rose with a silent, defying gravity smoothness that made my ears pop. It was a golden cage rocketing us toward the sky. I stood in the back watching the numbers on the digital display climb higher. 50, 51, 52. Every floor we passed was another layer of atmosphere between us and the real world. Tyson was practically vibrating. He adjusted his tie for the 10th time, looking at himself in the mirrored walls. "This is it, babe," he said, his voice thick with unearned pride. "We made it. Can you imagine the parties? Pool parties on the roof. I am going to invite the old crew just to see their faces. They are going to be so jealous." Paige didn't answer him. She was too busy performing. She held her phone out in front of her, the ring light clipped to the top, blindingly bright in the enclosed space. She had her influencer face on, lips pouted, eyes wide with manufactured wonder. "Hey guys," she chirped into the camera. "We are literally in the private elevator right now, heading up to the 60th floor. My father-in-law just bought the entire penthouse level. It is insane. We are talking Italian marble floors, crystal chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. I cannot wait to give you the grand tour. Tap those hearts if you are ready to see luxury." She spun the camera around to catch Tyson. "Say hi to the fans, babe." Tyson threw up a peace sign, grinning like a fool. "We are living the dream, baby." Then she turned the camera on me. "And there is Silas," she said, her voice dropping a little as if she were showing off a rescue dog. "He is a little camera shy, but we are going to get him a makeover soon." "Right, Silas?" I looked into the lens. I didn't smile. I stared right into the digital eye, knowing that thousands of strangers were watching. "Enjoy the show," I said. Paige laughed a fake tinkling sound. "He is so funny." "Okay guys, here we go. Floor 60. Prepare to have your minds blown." The elevator slowed. The sensation of movement stopped. There was a soft chime. The golden doors slid open. Paige stepped forward, leading with her phone ready to capture the opulence. "Oh my go!" she started to scream, but the word died in her throat. It turned into a strangled gasp. She stopped so abruptly that Tyson bumped into her back. "What is it, babe?" Tyson asked, peering over her shoulder. "Is it too much? Is it—" He stopped too. There was no Italian marble. There were no crystal chandeliers. There were no velvet drapes or plush carpets. There was nothing. The penthouse was a cavern, 5,000 square feet of raw industrial emptiness. The floor was unfinished concrete, gray and dusty, stained with patches of dried sealant. The walls were bare drywall, the seams still taped and mudded, white lines crisscrossing the gray like scars. Exposed ductwork hung from the ceiling like the ribs of a leviathan. Wires dangled from open junction boxes where light fixtures were supposed to be. It smelled of dust and cold air. It smelled like a construction site that had been abandoned. The only light came from the massive floor-to-ceiling windows which let in the brutal afternoon sun, illuminating every speck of dust dancing in the air. Paige lowered her phone. Her hand was trembling. "What is this?" she whispered. Her voice echoed in the vast empty space. "Where's the furniture? Where is the art? Where is the life?" Tyson stepped out of the elevator, his shoes crunching on the gritty floor. He spun around in a circle, his arms wide. "Dad," he said, his voice rising in panic. "Dad, what is going on? Is this the wrong floor? Did we get off on the service level? This can't be it. You said it was a penthouse." I stepped out of the elevator. I walked past them, my footsteps heavy and deliberate. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of concrete and opportunity. "It is the penthouse, Tyson," I said, my voice calm. "It is a shell unit. That is how real estate works at this level. You buy the space, you build the dream. But you said it was ready." Paige shrieked, spinning on her heel to face me. "You said we could move in. This isn't a home, it is a warehouse. How am I supposed to film here? There is no Wi-Fi, there is no furniture, there is—" She stopped again. Her eyes had adjusted to the glare of the sun, and she saw something in the middle of the room. In the exact center of the vast concrete floor sat a lonely island of clutter, a pile of mismatched junk that looked like it had been vomited up by a garbage truck. It was a beige microfiber sofa stained with red wine and dog urine. It was a particle board coffee table with a broken leg propped up by a stack of magazines. It was a 60-inch flat-screen TV with a crack running down the middle of the screen. It was piles of dirty laundry overflowing from plastic hampers, boxes of half-eaten takeout, a cat tower that had been shredded to ribbons. It was their stuff. It was the contents of the apartment they had been evicted from this morning. I had arranged for the movers to pick it up from the curb where the sheriff had dumped it and bring it here. I wanted them to feel at home. Paige walked toward the pile slowly as if she were approaching a bomb. She reached out and touched the stained arm of the sofa. She recoiled as if it had bitten her. "This is our stuff," she whispered. "This is our old couch. Why is our garbage here?" Tyson ran over, kicking a box of old sneakers. "Dad, why is our stuff here? Who brought this up here? This is embarrassing. Look at it. It looks like a dump." I walked over to the pile. I picked up a dirty t-shirt from the floor. It was one of Tyson's designer shirts stained with sweat. "It is your stuff," I said, tossing the shirt back onto the pile. "I thought you would appreciate the gesture. I paid the movers extra to bring it up. You said you wanted to move in. Well, here you are. All the comforts of home." Paige screamed. It was a primal sound of rage and frustration. She threw her phone onto the concrete floor. It bounced and skidded, the screen cracking. "This is a joke," she yelled, her face turning red. "This has to be a sick joke. Where is the real furniture, Silas? Where is the $5 million worth of decor? You showed us the bank book. You have the money. Why are we standing in a construction zone looking at my dirty underwear?" I leaned against a concrete pillar, crossing my arms. "There is no furniture, Paige," I said. "There is no decor. Because I didn't buy a finished home. I bought a distressed asset. I bought a debt." "What are you talking about?" Tyson asked, his voice trembling. I pointed at the pile of trash. "That is what you own, son. That pile of garbage. That is your net worth. And this apartment, this shell, it is exactly what you deserve. It is empty. Just like your promises. Just like your gratitude." Paige marched up to me, getting right in my face. I could smell the fear coming off her mixed with her expensive perfume. "You tricked us," she hissed. "You brought us here to humiliate us." "I didn't trick you," I said, looking down at her. "I gave you exactly what you asked for. You wanted the penthouse. You signed the papers for the penthouse. You are now the legal residents of the penthouse." I gestured around the room. "Congratulations. It is all yours. The view, the square footage, and the echo." Tyson looked around the room, his eyes wild. "But we can't live here, Dad. There is no kitchen. There are no bathrooms. It is freezing." "There is a service sink in the utility closet," I said. "And I think there is a working toilet in the master bath. You will have to bring your own toilet paper, though." I didn't think to stock up. Paige grabbed Tyson's arm, her nails digging into his suit jacket. "We are leaving," she said. "We are going to a hotel. I am not staying here. This is insane. Come on, Tyson. Let's go." She tried to pull him toward the elevator. "Go ahead," I said. "But before you go, you might want to check your bank accounts. You might want to see if your cards still work at a hotel." Tyson froze. He looked at me, his face pale. "What did you do?" he whispered. "I didn't do anything I said. You did it. You signed the papers, Tyson. You signed the liability transfer. Do you know what happens when you sign as a guarantor for a distressed asset with a $2 million lien against it?" Tyson shook his head, mute with horror. "Your assets get frozen," I explained, my voice cold and hard. "The bank secures its interest. Every dime you have, every line of credit is now collateral for this concrete box. You can't leave, Tyson. You can't go to a hotel. You can't even buy a sandwich." Paige let go of Tyson's arm. She backed away from him, looking at him with pure revulsion. "You broke us!" she screamed. "You idiot! You signed it! You signed everything away!" She turned to me, her eyes pleading now, desperate. "Silas, please!" "I didn't sign it. It was Tyson. Let me go. I am pregnant. You can't do this to a pregnant woman." I looked at her stomach, flat as a board. "Pregnant?" I asked. "Yes," she cried, clutching her midsection. "I was going to tell you tonight. A surprise. Your grandchild. Please, Silas, don't make me stay here." I reached into my jacket pocket. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a bank book. It was a report from the private investigator Mr. Sharp had hired. I unfolded it slowly. "That is interesting, Paige," I said, reading from the paper. "Because according to this report from the clinic you visited last week for your Botox injections, you aren't pregnant. In fact, you had a procedure done 3 years ago that makes it impossible for you to get pregnant. You tied your tubes, Paige. You didn't want any parasites ruining your figure. Isn't that what you told the doctor?" Paige's face went white. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the wind whistling through the cracks in the unfinished windows. Tyson looked at his wife. "You lied," he whispered. "You told me we were trying." I dropped the paper on the floor. It fluttered down, landing on top of the pile of dirty laundry. "Lies," I said. "That is all you have. Lies and garbage. And now you have a concrete box to keep them in." I walked toward the elevator. "Where are you going?" Tyson shouted, his voice cracking. "You can't leave us here." I pressed the call button. The golden doors opened immediately. "I am going home," I said, "to my dingy apartment, to my memories." "But you signed the lease," Paige screamed, running toward me. "You are the owner. You have to stay." I stepped into the elevator. I turned to face them. "Read the contract, Paige," I said as the doors began to close. "I am the owner of the deed. You are the residents. You are the managers. I am just the silent investor, and I am evicting myself." The doors slid shut, cutting off their screams. I stood in the silence of the elevator, watching the numbers count down. 60, 59, 58. I felt lighter with every floor. I had stripped them of everything, their pride, their lies, their future. They were trapped in a gilded cage of their own making, high above the world, with nothing but their own rot to keep them company. It was cruel, it was ruthless, and it was the best thing I had ever done for them. Now they would learn what it meant to start from zero, or rather from -2 million. The elevator hit the lobby. The doors opened. Mr. Sharp was waiting. "How did it go?" he asked. I adjusted my cuffs. "They love the view," I said. Mr. Sharp smiled. "Excellent. The power and water are scheduled to be shut off in 2 hours." "Perfect," I said. "Let's go get a drink, Sharp. Somewhere cheap." We walked out of the Millennium Tower, leaving my son and his wife in the darkness they deserved. The elevator doors were trying to close, the metal plates sliding toward each other to seal me off from the rot I had left behind. But Tyson, fueled by a sudden manic burst of desperation, jammed the toe of his designer boot into the gap. The safety sensors tripped. The doors bounced back open with a pneumatic hiss. He lunged at me. He didn't look like my son anymore. He looked like a junkie who had been denied his fix. He grabbed the lapels of my charcoal suit, his knuckles white, his breath smelling of stale champagne and fear. "You are lying," he screamed, spit flying from his mouth and landing on my cheek. "You showed us the book." $5 million. I saw it. Paige saw it. You can't fake a bank book like that. Give me the access codes, old man. Give them to me right now, or I swear to God I will. He raised a fist. My own son. The boy I had carried on my shoulders at the zoo. The boy I had taught to tie his shoes. He raised a fist to strike his 68-year-old father over a book of paper and ink. I didn't flinch. I didn't cower. I didn't play the part of the frail, confused geriatric anymore. That mask had served its purpose, and now it was time to burn it. I reached up and clamped my hand around his wrist. My grip wasn't the weak grasp of a pensioner. It was iron. It was forged from 40 years of lifting crates, wrestling loading dock chains, and building an empire with my bare hands. I squeezed until I felt the tendons in his wrist grind together. Tyson gasped, his eyes bulging. He dropped his hand, his fist uncurling into a claw of pain. He looked at me in shock, rubbing his wrist, trying to understand where the strength had come from. I pushed him back. It was a short, sharp shove, but it sent him stumbling. He tripped over a box of his own discarded sneakers and landed hard on his backside in the dust. "Sit down, Tyson," I said. My voice wasn't raspy anymore. It didn't waver. It was deep, resonant, the voice that used to command 300 men on a shipping floor during a hurricane. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small black remote. I pointed it at the far wall of the penthouse where the raw concrete was smoothest and darkest. I pressed a button. A portable laser projector hidden in the ceiling beams alongside the security cameras I had installed last week hummed to life. A beam of blue light cut through the dusty air, hitting the wall with crystal clarity. It projected a computer screen. It was the banking interface for the First National account I had shown them that morning. The balance shone in bold black numbers, $5,000, $1,000. "There it is," Paige shouted, pointing a trembling finger at the wall. "Look, $5 million, I told you he had it. He is holding out on us." I pressed another button on the remote. The screen refreshed. The numbers flickered. A large red banner appeared across the top of the projected image, pulsing like a warning light. "Simulation mode. Demo account. No real funds. The silence that followed was heavy. It pressed down on us like the concrete ceiling suffocating the greed in the room. Tyson stared at the wall. He blinked once, twice, trying to make the red letters disappear. He looked like a man trying to read a map in a foreign language. "It is fake," he whispered, his voice hollow. "It is a training module," I said, stepping into the light of the projector so my shadow fell over the fake millions. "It is software used to train bank tellers. I had a friend code a custom scenario for me. The numbers are real enough to look at, but you can't spend them, you can't transfer them. They are ghosts, Tyson, just like your inheritance." "But why?" Paige cried, her voice cracking. "Why would you do that? To test you," I said. "To see if there was any part of you, any tiny fragment that wanted to be here for me. To see if you would look at the money or look at your father. You looked at the money. You didn't even blink. You were counting it before I even finished my coffee." I unbuttoned my jacket. I took off the thick, smudge-stained glasses I used to fake my bad eyesight and tossed them onto the concrete floor. They skittered away, coming to rest near a pile of dirty laundry. I stood up straight, rolling my shoulders back, shedding the weight of the years I had pretended to carry. "I am done pretending," I said. I looked at Tyson. He was sitting on the floor, surrounded by his trash, looking up at me like a confused child who had just been told Santa Claus was dead. "You think I am just a warehouse manager, don't you?" I asked. "You think I spent 40 years moving boxes and taking orders?" Tyson nodded dumbly. I laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound that scraped against the walls. "I was the warehouse manager for 3 years, Tyson. Then I bought stock. I bought equity. I saw potential in a small logistics firm called Apex Global when everyone else saw a risky startup. I put every dime of my overtime pay into that company. I ate ramen noodles for a decade so I could buy more shares." Tyson's eyes went wide. "Apex Global," he stammered. That is the biggest logistics firm on the coast. I applied there. I applied for a VP position last year." "I know," I said. He frowned, confusion warring with fear. "How do you know I never told you?" "Because I am the one who rejected your application," I said. The color drained from his face completely. He looked like a ghost. "I am a silent partner, Tyson. I own 15% of the company. I sit on the strategic board. When your resume came across the desk, the hiring manager flagged it because of the last name. He brought it to me. He thought it would be a nice surprise." I walked closer to him, my footsteps echoing on the concrete. "I read your cover letter. It was full of buzzwords and arrogance. You claimed credit for projects you didn't lead. You inflated your numbers. But that wasn't why I rejected you." "Why?" Tyson whispered. "Because I checked your references," I said. "I called your previous supervisors, not the ones you listed, the real ones. They all said the same thing. You were lazy. You were entitled. You treated the support staff like dirt. You parked in the handicapped spots. You stole lunches from the break room refrigerator." I looked him in the eye. "I didn't reject you because you are my son. I rejected you because you are a liability, and I don't allow liabilities in my company." Paige stood up. Her face was red, her chest heaving. She looked like a cornered rat. "You are a monster," she screamed. "You sabotaged him. You ruined his career, and now you lured us here to trap us. This is fraud, Silas. This is entrapment." She pulled out her phone. The screen cracked from when she threw it earlier. Her fingers flew across the glass. "I am calling my lawyer," she hissed. "I am going to sue you for everything you have. I am going to sue you for fraud, for emotional distress, for kidnapping. You can't keep us here. I will take your real money, Silas. I will take every cent of that Apex stock." I looked at her. I looked at the phone in her hand, and I laughed. It started as a chuckle low in my chest and grew into a roar. It bounced off the concrete walls, amplifying until it filled the empty space. I laughed until my sides hurt. I laughed at the absurdity of it all, at the sheer unmitigated gall of this woman. "Sue me," I said, wiping a tear from my eye. "Please, Paige, do it. Call your lawyer. Call the police. Call the Pope for all I care." I gestured to the room, to the empty walls, the pile of trash. "What are you going to sue me for? Providing you with housing. I gave you a lease. You signed it. I gave you access. You have the keys. I am not keeping you here. You are free to leave. But as I told you, the debt follows you. The moment you step out that door, the bank freezes your assets." And as for fraud, I continued, my voice turning cold again, "fraud requires deception for unlawful gain. What did I gain? Paige, your company, your dirty laundry. I kicked a pile of clothes. I gained nothing but a headache. But you have money, she shrieked. You have millions. You just admitted it, and you tricked us into signing that debt liability. That is predatory. No judge will uphold it. Maybe, I said, maybe a judge would look at a pregnant woman and take pity. Maybe a judge would see a struggling young couple and void the contract. I paused, letting the hope bloom in her eyes for just a second. I wanted her to feel it so I could crush it. But before you dial that number, before you file that lawsuit, you might want to see what else I have in my pocket. I reached into my jacket again. Because if we are going to talk about fraud, Paige, if we are going to talk about deception, we should probably talk about what you have been doing while Tyson was at work. Or where you really go when you say you are at the gym. Paige froze. Her thumb hovered over her phone screen. What are you talking about? She whispered. I pulled out a thick manila envelope. It wasn't a prop. It wasn't a fake bank book. It was heavy with photographs and bank statements. I am talking about the truth, I said. I tossed the envelope onto the floor. It slid across the concrete, stopping right at Tyson's feet. Open it, Tyson, I commanded. See what your loving wife has been up to. Tyson looked at the envelope. He looked at Paige. She was shaking her head, her eyes wide with terror. Don't, she mouthed. Don't open it. Tyson reached for the envelope. Go ahead, son, I said. Consider it a housewarming gift. He ripped it open. Photos spilled out. Grainy surveillance photos. Crisp bank screenshots. And as Tyson looked at the first photo, his world didn't just crack. It shattered. You thought the empty apartment was the surprise, I said, my voice low and dangerous. The surprise hasn't even started yet. Tyson held the envelope like it was a live grenade. His hands were shaking so bad the papers inside rustled against the cardboard. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for a reprieve, asking for permission to put it down and walk away. But I just nodded toward the flap. Open it, son, I said, my voice flat. You wanted the truth. You wanted to know why I wouldn't invest in your startup. You wanted to know why I wouldn't sell the family home. The answer is in your hands. He pulled the tab. The sound of tearing paper was loud in the empty concrete box. He reached inside and pulled out a stack of glossy 8x10 photographs. They weren't art, they were surveillance. High-resolution night shots taken with a telephoto lens. The first photo hit the floor face up. It showed Paige. She was wearing a red dress, a dress I recognized because she had charged it to my credit card 3 months ago. She was standing outside the valet stand of the Viceroy Hotel. She wasn't alone. A man was with her, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. He was tall, well-built, and wearing a suit that fit him better than Tyson's ever did. Tyson stared at the photo. He blinked. He tilted his head as if the angle would change the reality of what he was seeing. That is Dante, he whispered. The name came out like a curse. That is Dante Williams. I knew the name. Dante was Tyson's nemesis. They had started at the same brokerage firm 5 years ago. Dante had been promoted. Tyson had been fired. Dante had started his own consulting group. Tyson had started begging me for money. Keep looking, I said. Tyson dropped the next photo. It showed Paige and Dante inside the hotel bar. They were laughing. Dante was whispering something in her ear. Her hand was on his knee. It wasn't the body language of friends. It was the body language of lovers. The third photo was the killer. It showed them entering an elevator. Paige was kissing him. Her arms were wrapped around his neck, her legs tangled with his. Tyson made a sound that was half sob, half retch. He dropped the rest of the stack. They fanned out across the dusty floor a mosaic of betrayal. Paige and Dante at dinner, Paige and Dante in a jewelry store, Paige and Dante entering her car. He turned to Paige. His face was a mask of confusion and pain. You told me you hated him, Tyson stammered. You told me he was a snake. You said he sabotaged my accounts. You said he was the reason I got fired. Paige didn't look at the photos. She looked at me, her eyes burning with hate. She knew she was cornered, but she wasn't ready to surrender. She crossed her arms over her chest defensively. It was business, she snapped. I was trying to network Tyson. Dante has connections. I was trying to get him to invest in your company since your own father wouldn't do it. I was doing what I had to do to survive. Networking. Tyson shouted, his voice cracking. You are kissing him, Paige. You are going into a hotel room with him at 2 in the morning. That is not networking. He looked down at the timestamp on the photos. "This is from last Friday," he said. "You told me you were at your mother's. You said she was sick. I stayed home and watched your cat while you were with him." Paige rolled her eyes. "Oh, grow up, Tyson. I was securing our future. Dante has real money. He doesn't play games with fake bank books. He appreciates ambition." I stepped forward, my shoes crunching on the gravel. "He appreciates your spending habits too," I said. "Or maybe he doesn't. Maybe that is why you had to steal from your husband." Tyson looked up at me, distracted from the affair by the new accusation. "Steal?" he asked. "What do you mean, steal?" I pointed to the second envelope, the blue one that was still tucked under his arm. "Check the financials, Tyson. You told me your crypto wallet was hacked. You told me the $50,000 I gave you for the server farm disappeared into the blockchain. You cried in my kitchen. You swore it was Russian hackers." I walked over and snatched the blue envelope from him. I ripped it open and dumped the contents onto the floor next to the photos. Bank statements fluttered down, credit card receipts, PayPal transfer logs. "It wasn't hackers, son," I said. "It was handbags." I picked up a sheet and held it in front of Tyson's face. "Look at the transfers. $50,000 moved in small increments over 3 months. Not to a crypto exchange, but to an account listed under PJ Consulting." Paige tried to snatch the paper, but I pulled it back. PJ Consulting. I continued reading the incorporation documents attached to the statement. Sole proprietor Paige Jefferson. And here are the outgoing expenses from that account. I read the list. Real Luxury Resale, $4,000. Sephora, $2,000. Viral FameBot Farm, $5,000. I looked at Paige. "You bought likes, Paige," I said, my voice dripping with disdain. "You stole your husband's seed money, the money he begged his father for, and you used it to buy fake followers on Instagram and vintage Gucci bags." Tyson was reading the statements now. He was tracing the lines with a shaking finger. "You bought bots," he whispered. "You have 300,000 followers. You told me you were an influencer. You told me brands were paying you." Paige laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. "You are so stupid, Tyson," she spat. "Brands don't pay nobodies unless they have numbers. I had to build the platform. It takes money to make money. I was investing in my brand. Since your stupid startup was going nowhere anyway, I put the money where it would actually do some good. My startup was going to work," Tyson yelled, throwing the papers at her. "It was a solid plan. I just needed the capital. And you stole it. You stole everything." "I didn't steal it," Paige screamed back, stepping into his space, her face twisted into a snarl. "I repurposed it. Because you are a failure, Tyson. You have always been a failure." Tyson recoiled as if she had slapped him. He looked at her, and for the first time I saw the love die in his eyes. It didn't fade away slowly. It was extinguished, instantly, snuffed out by the cold wind of reality. He looked at the woman he had married, the woman he had defended against me, against his friends, against common sense. And he saw a stranger. "You are a monster," he said, his voice hollow. "You cheated on me with Dante. You stole my money. You lied about the baby. You lied about everything." Paige stopped screaming. She straightened her jacket, smoothing the fabric. She looked around the empty concrete penthouse, then back at Tyson. Her expression was cold, calm, and utterly devoid of empathy. "I did what I had to do," she said. "Do you think I married you for your personality, Tyson? Do you think I married you for your looks?" She laughed again, and it echoed off the walls. "I married you because your last name is Jefferson. I married you because you told me your father was loaded. I married you because I thought you were my ticket to the easy life. But look at you." She gestured at him, sitting in the dust, surrounded by evidence of her betrayal. "You are weak. You are pathetic. You can't even get a job without your daddy making a phone call. You are 32 years old, and you are still waiting for an allowance." She turned to me, her eyes flashing. "And you," she hissed. "You are just a sad old man playing games. You think this proves something. You think this makes you powerful. It just makes you petty. You have millions, and you let your son rot. You let us struggle." "I didn't let you struggle," I said, my voice low. "I let you live. I let you make your own choices. And look what you chose. I chose to survive," Paige snapped. "Unlike your son, who chooses to whine." Tyson stood up slowly. He was shaking not from fear, but from rage. He looked at the photos of Dante again. He looked at the bank statements. "I defended you," he said, his voice rising. "I cut off my friends for you. I almost cut off my father for you. I put everything in your name because you said it was safer. And that is why you are an idiot, Paige said, getting right in his face. A real man would have secured the bag. A real man wouldn't have let his father trick him into signing a debt trap. Dante would have read the contract. Dante would have taken this penthouse and flipped it for a profit. You just signed your own death warrant. You are right, Tyson said. He clenched his fists. I am an idiot. He looked at me. His eyes were wet, but his jaw was set. I am an idiot for bringing you here, he said to Paige. Then he did something I didn't expect. He didn't hit her. He didn't scream. He reached out and grabbed the strap of her Louis Vuitton bag, the one she had bought with his stolen money. Give it back, he said. Paige shrieked, clutching the bag. Get off me! This is mine! You bought it with my money, Tyson yelled, pulling harder. It is mine! They wrestled in the center of the room, two desperate people fighting over a piece of leather in a concrete wasteland. It was pathetic. It was tragic. It was the perfect ending to their love story. Let go! Paige screamed, scratching at his face. Her nails left red welts on his cheek. Tyson yanked the bag with all his strength. The strap snapped. Paige stumbled back, tripping over her own heels. She landed hard on her backside, sliding across the dusty floor. Contents of the bag spilled out. Makeup, a wallet, a second phone. Tyson stood over her, breathing heavy, holding the broken bag. It is over, he said. We are done. Paige scrambled backward, looking up at him with fear for the first time, not because he was violent, but because he was finally seeing her. You can't leave me, she hissed. We signed the lease together. We are in this debt together. Tyson looked at me. He looked at the contract lying on the floor, the one that bound them to $2 million of debt. Dad, he said, his voice breaking. Is it true? Am I trapped with her? I looked at my son. He was bleeding from the scratch on his face. He was holding a broken purse. He looked like a man who had lost everything, but in doing so had finally found his spine. The contract is binding, I said. The debt is joint and several. That means the bank can come after both of you or either of you. Tyson looked at Paige. Then I guess it is a race, he said. He dropped the bag. I guess it is a race to see who drowns first. Paige stood up, dusting herself off. Her eyes were wild. I am not drowning, she spat. I am a survivor. She looked at me. I am going to fix this, she said. I am going to find a way out of this contract. And then I am going to take everything you have, Silas. I swear it. I smiled. You can try, Paige, I said. But you have a bigger problem right now. What she demanded. I pointed to the door. I think your ride is here. Mr. Sharp stepped into the room. He wasn't smiling anymore. He looked at Paige, then at Tyson. Mr. and Mrs. Jefferson, he said, his voice grave. I have just been informed by building security that there are some gentlemen in the lobby asking for you. They say they are from a company called Quick Cash Solutions. They say they saw a live stream and recognized the location. Paige's face went from white to translucent. Quick Cash Solutions. Tyson repeated, confused. Who are they? Paige didn't answer. She started backing toward the balcony door. They are the loan sharks, I said. The ones Paige borrowed $8,000 from to pay for her car lease. And if they are here, it means they saw her video. They know where she is. And they know she isn't pregnant. Paige looked at the elevator, then at the service stairs. She looked like a trapped animal. Tyson looked at her with pure disgust. You borrowed from loan sharks, he asked. In my name. Paige didn't answer. She ran. She ran toward the fire exit, her heels clicking frantically on the concrete. Tyson watched her go. He didn't chase her. He turned to me. Dad, he said. Help me. I looked at him. I looked at the mess on the floor. I already did help you, son, I said. I showed you the truth. Now deal with it. Mr. Sharp stood in the doorway of the penthouse like a sentinel in a navy suit, blocking the only exit that didn't involve a 60-story drop. Paige had frozen mid-stride, her hand clutching the strap of her broken purse, the panic on her face warring with her confusion. Tyson was still on the floor, surrounded by the evidence of his wife's infidelity and his own financial ruin. I stepped forward. The concrete dust crunched under my shoes. It was a gritty sound, a sound of finality. You might want to stay inside, I said, my voice echoing in the hollow space. Those gentlemen from Quick Cash Solutions are remarkably persistent. And unlike Mr. Sharp here, they do not bill by the hour. They bill by the broken bone. Paige retreated from the door. She looked at Mr. Sharp, then at me. Her eyes darted around the empty room, looking for a way out, looking for a lawyer, looking for anyone who would tell her this was just a bad dream. But there was no one, just the four of us, and the silence of the unfinished tower. Mr. Sharp walked into the room. He didn't look at the mess on the floor. He didn't look at the photos of Paige kissing another man. He was a professional. He was here for the paperwork. He opened his briefcase. The click of the latches was loud, sharp, and precise. He pulled out the document they had signed in the lobby less than an hour ago, the thick, bound manuscript that Paige had been so eager to autograph. He held it up. The light from the setting sun caught the glossy cover. "Before you go downstairs to greet your guests," Mr. Sharp said, his tone conversational, almost pleasant. "There is a small matter of housekeeping we need to address, specifically regarding your residency status here at Millennium Tower." Tyson looked up. He wiped a streak of blood from his cheek where Paige had scratched him. "What does it matter?" he croaked. "We are leaving. We are done. You can have your stupid, empty apartment, Dad. We don't want it." Mr. Sharp smiled. It was a thin smile, a shark smile. "I am afraid it is not that simple, Tyson," he said. "You see, possession is 9/10 of the law, and contractual obligation is the other 10th. You signed the residency and liability transfer agreement." He flipped the document open to the last page. He pointed to Tyson's signature scrawled in black ink right next to Paige's flamboyant autograph. "Do you remember signing this?" "I signed it because I thought I was getting keys," Tyson spat. "I didn't know I was signing up for a prison sentence." Mr. Sharp adjusted his glasses. He looked down at the paper, reading from the fine print. Clause 14, Section B. "The signatories herein referred to as the guarantors agree to assume full responsibility for the underlying asset, debt, and maintenance costs associated with Unit 60A. Paige stepped forward. Her fear was being replaced by that sharp, cornered anger she used as a weapon. "What asset debt?" she demanded. "You own the place, Silas. You paid cash. You said you bought it yesterday." I leaned against a concrete pillar. I crossed my arms. "I did buy it yesterday, Paige," I said. "But I didn't pay full price. Do you know why this unit is unfinished? Do you know why it has been sitting empty for 2 years while the rest of the building sold out?" She stared at me silent. "Because the developer went bankrupt," I explained. "He ran out of money. He took out a massive construction loan to finish the tower, and he defaulted on the penthouse. This unit isn't just an apartment, it is a lien. It is a toxic asset." I walked toward them. I bought the note, Paige. I bought the debt from the bank for pennies on the dollar. I own the paper. But the property itself carries a liability, a construction lien. Mr. Sharp cleared his throat. $2.4 million to be exact, plus accrued interest. Tyson scrambled to his feet. He looked at me, his eyes wide with horror. $2 million, he whispered. "That is the debt attached to this deed," I said. "And when you signed that paper downstairs, when you signed as the guarantors and primary residents, you didn't just get key fob access. You assumed the position of the debtor." Mr. Sharp nodded. "It is a standard clause in distressed asset transfers. Usually the new owner assumes the debt. But in this case, your father structured the deed transfer so that the residency rights and the financial liabilities are bundled. By accepting the keys and signing as the heads of household, you legally volunteered to take over the payments." Paige let out a strangled sound. "No, that is illegal. You can't just transfer debt like that without disclosing it." Mr. Sharp held up the document again. "It is fully disclosed, Mrs. Jefferson. On page 4, page 12, and page 47, in bold text. You initialed right next to it. See, here, and here." He pointed to her own initials written in her loopy, confident hand. "You didn't read it," I said. "You were too busy thinking about your TikTok views. You were too busy drinking my champagne. You saw a contract and you thought it was a coronation." Tyson grabbed the document from Mr. Sharp's hands. He ripped through the pages, tearing the paper in his haste. He found the page. He read it. His lips moved silently. "Floating interest rate," he read aloud, his voice shaking. "Immediate repayment clause triggered upon occupancy. Balloon payment due in 90 days. He looked up at me. He looked sick. "Interest rate?" Paige asked, her voice barely a squeak. "Variable," Mr. Sharp said cheerfully. "Currently sitting at 12%. but there is a penalty APR for the previous owner's default. So effectively you are looking at about 18%, compounded daily. Tyson did the math in his head. I could see the numbers crushing him. That is $30,000 a month, he stammered. Just in interest. Plus the principal, Mr. Sharp added. And the condo fees, which are $4,000 a month for a unit of this size. And since you are now the liable parties, the building management will be looking to you for those checks starting on the 1st of the month, which is tomorrow, I added helpfully. Paige sank to her knees. She didn't fall gracefully. She collapsed as if her legs had turned to water. She sat in the dust, her expensive dress ruining. "We can't pay that," she whispered. "We have nothing. You know we have nothing. We are being evicted. I have $8,000 in debt to loan sharks. Tyson owes $80,000. "That sounds like a personal problem," I said. "But you have money," she screamed, looking up at me, her face twisted and ugly with tears. "You have millions. You can pay it off. You can fix this." I agreed. I could write a check right now and clear the lien. I could finish this apartment. I could turn it into the palace you wanted. I paused, letting the silence stretch. "But I won't." "Why?" Tyson cried. "Why do you hate us so much?" "I don't hate you, son," I said. "Hate takes energy. I am just indifferent. I am indifferent to your struggles because you were indifferent to mine. You watched me work double shifts for 20 years and you never asked if I was tired. You watched your mother die and you complained about the cost of the funeral. You tried to put me in a home so you could steal a fortune you didn't earn." I walked over to the window. I looked out at the city spread below us. It looked small from up here, manageable. "You wanted the penthouse," I said without turning around. "You wanted the high life. Well, this is what it costs. It costs risk. It costs debt. It costs sleepless nights wondering if the bank is going to take it all away. I lived that life for 40 years building my portfolio. Now it is your turn." Tyson dropped the contract. It hit the floor with a heavy slap. He looked at the document, then at his hands. He looked at me, his father, the man who had carried him to bed when he fell asleep on the couch. He dropped to his knees. He crawled across the dirty concrete until he was at my feet. He reached out and grabbed the hem of my trousers. "Dad, please," he sobbed. "I am sorry. I am so sorry. I was stupid. I was weak. She made me do it." He pointed a shaking finger at Paige. "She told me to take the money. She told me to get the power of attorney. I didn't want to hurt you, Dad. I just wanted to be enough." He buried his face in the fabric of my suit. He wept. It was a pathetic sound, the sound of a man who had never grown up. "Dad, you set me up," he choked out. "You tricked me. You gamed me." I looked down at him. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel triumph. I just felt a cold clarity. "I didn't set you up, Tyson," I said, my voice hard as flint. "I didn't force your hand. I didn't hold a gun to your head." I reached down and pried his fingers off my leg. I stepped back. "I just handed you a pen," I said. I pointed to the contract lying in the dust. "I put the paper in front of you. I told you it was a liability transfer. The lawyer told you it was a liability transfer. The document said it was a liability transfer." Tyson looked up at me, his eyes red and swollen. "But we trusted you," he whispered. "And that was your mistake," I said. "You trusted that I was a fool. You trusted that I was a senile old man who existed only to serve you. You trusted your own greed more than you respected my intelligence." I looked at Paige, who was staring at the wall, rocking back and forth, mumbling to herself. "Your greed signed that paper, Tyson," I said. "Not me. Your entitlement signed it. Your laziness signed it. I just provided the ink." Mr. Sharp snapped his briefcase shut. "The building management has been notified of the change in liability," he said. "They will be sending the first invoice to your email address, Tyson. Also, since the Quick Cash Solutions team is still in the lobby, and they seem quite agitated, I would suggest you find a way to start making payments. They mentioned something about collateral. I believe they were looking at your knees." Tyson scrambled back from me. He looked at the elevator, then at the stairs, then at the window. He looked like a rat in a bucket. "I am going to declare bankruptcy," he said, his voice rising in hysteria. "I will file Chapter 7. I will wipe it all out. You can't trap me." Mr. Sharp sighed. He looked disappointed. "Did you read Clause 52? He asked. "It is a fraud protection clause. Since you signed the document knowing you had no assets to cover the liability, and since you misrepresented your financial status to the building board, any attempt to discharge this debt through bankruptcy will be challenged as fraud, which is a federal crime." He smiled politely. "So you can go to jail for fraud, or you can stay here and pay the debt. Those are your options." Tyson looked at me. He looked for the father who used to fix his bike. He didn't find him. "You are the devil," he whispered. I fixed my cuffs. I smoothed my jacket. "I am not the devil's son," I said. "I am just the landlord, and rent is due." I nodded to Mr. Sharp. "We are done here." Mr. Sharp walked to the elevator and pressed the button. The doors opened. "Wait!" Paige screamed, scrambling up from the floor. "You can't leave us here with them. The loan sharks, they are going to come up." "They can't come up without a key card," I said, stepping into the elevator. "And you have the only keys." I pointed to the black cards Paige had snatched so eagerly in the lobby. They were still clutched in her hand. "Keep the doors locked," I advised. "It might take them a few hours to figure out how to bypass the security. You have time to think. Time to pray." I looked at Tyson one last time. He was standing in the middle of the empty room, surrounded by his trash, holding a contract that owned his life. "Goodbye, Tyson," I said. The doors slid shut. The last thing I saw was my son's face twisted in a scream that no one outside those soundproof walls would ever hear. The elevator began its descent. I watched the numbers drop. I felt the pressure change in my ears. It was over. The trap had snapped. The lesson had been delivered. But as the elevator hit the lobby, I knew the night wasn't finished. There was one more loose end to tie up, one more layer of justice to apply. Because while Tyson and Paige were trapped in the sky, I still had work to do on the ground. I stepped out of the elevator and walked across the marble lobby. Mr. Sharp was right beside me. We did not leave the building. We went to the private residence lounge on the mezzanine level. It had a glass balcony that overlooked the main entrance. It was the perfect vantage point. I ordered a vintage Cabernet, not the cheap stuff I drank at home, but a bottle that tasted like victory. I sat in a velvet chair and watched the front doors. It did not take long. The live stream page had broadcasted earlier, the one where she bragged about the view, and the location had done exactly what I calculated it would do. She had sent up a flare. She had announced to the world, and specifically to the people she owed money to, exactly where she was hiding. 3 men walked through the revolving doors. They did not look like residents. They wore leather jackets that were too tight and expressions that were too loose. They looked like trouble. One of them was holding a phone. I could see the screen even from up here. It was paused on a frame of Paige's face. They walked up to the concierge desk. I could not hear the words, but I knew the script. They were looking for the girl in the video. They were looking for their money. Upstairs on the 60th floor, my son was discovering the second phase of his punishment. I pulled out my tablet. Mr. Sharp had mirrored Tyson's phone notifications to my device, a little clause in the power of attorney paperwork Tyson had tried to get me to sign, but which I had reversed on him in the final contract. He had not read that part either. I watched the notifications roll in like a storm tide. Ding, First National Bank, account frozen. Ding, American Express, card declined, credit limit revoked. Ding, BMW Financial Services, repossession order issued. Tyson was watching his digital life bleed out. The liability transfer he had signed was not just a debt, it was a black hole. It triggered a cross-default clause in every other contract he held. The bank saw the $2 million lien and they panicked. They were cutting their losses. They were cutting him off. I took a sip of wine. It was smooth. It did not taste like iron. Down in the lobby, the men in leather jackets were getting loud. They were arguing with the security guard. One of them pointed at the elevator bank. They knew she was up there. They were wolves circling the tree where the cat was hiding. But the wolves were not the only predators in the forest tonight. Blue lights flashed against the glass walls of the lobby, silent but authoritative. 2 police cruisers pulled up to the curb, displacing the loan shark's double-parked van. 4 officers stepped out. They were not beat cops. They were detectives. I recognized the lead officer, Detective Miller, Economic Crimes Division. Mr. Sharp checked his watch. Right on time, he noted. The detectives entered the lobby. The loan shark saw the badges and scattered like cockroaches when the kitchen light turns on. They retreated to the corners, trying to look like tourists. Detective Miller walked to the desk. He did not ask for permission. He flashed a warrant. I knew what was on that paper. It was not for me. It was not for the debt. It was for Paige. We had dug deep. Mr. Sharp's investigators had found the skeletons in her closet, and they were rattling loud enough to wake the dead. Identity theft, credit card fraud from 3 years ago in Florida. She had opened accounts in the names of her patients when she was a nurse. She had stolen from the sick to pay for her face. I watched Miller talking to the concierge. The concierge pointed up, toward the penthouse. I stood up and walked to the railing. I wanted a better look. This is the part where the tragic hero usually feels a pang of guilt, where the father wonders if he went too far. I felt nothing. I checked my pulse. Steady. Calm. I picked up my phone and dialed the penthouse landline. It was the only phone they had left that worked. It rang once, twice. Tyson picked up. He sounded breathless, terrified. "Dad," he whispered. "Dad, please. The power is out. It is dark up here." "I know, son," I said. "I had them cut it. Bills were not paid." "Dad, my cards are not working." Tyson sobbed. "I tried to order food. I tried to book a flight. Everything is declined. The bank sent me a text. They said I am in default. That happens," I said, swirling the wine in my glass, "when you sign your life away." "Dad, there are men downstairs." Paige saw them from the window. "The loan sharks. They are walking around the lobby. They are going to kill us." I looked down at the lobby. The loan sharks were actually leaving, pushed out by the police presence. But Tyson did not know that. Fear is a powerful hallucinogen. "They look very upset, Tyson," I lied. "One of them has a tire iron." Tyson whimpered. "But there is good news," I said. "The police are here too." "The police?" Tyson sounded hopeful. "Did you call them? Are they here to help us?" I took a long, slow sip of wine. "Not exactly, son," I said. "They are here for your wife." "What?" "Put her on the phone," I commanded. There was a scuffling sound. Then Paige's voice, shrill and panicked. "Silas, you have to help us. Those men outside—" "They are not the problem, Paige," I interrupted. "The police are in the lobby. They have a warrant." "A warrant," she breathed. "For who?" "For Tyson. I told you he was a crook." I laughed. It was a genuine laugh. Even at the end, she threw him under the bus. "No, Paige. For you. For the credit card fraud in Miami. For the identity theft. The detectives are very eager to meet the influencer who stole from cancer patients." There was silence on the line. Heavy, suffocating silence. "They are coming up, Paige," I said. "Elevators are locked down for them. You have about 2 minutes." I hung up the phone. I looked down at the lobby. Detective Miller and his team were heading for the elevators. The golden doors opened for them. I sat back down. I picked up a cracker and a slice of sharp cheddar. The show was entering the third act. The climax. Mr. Sharp poured himself a glass of water. "Do you think they will resist?" he asked. I chewed the cracker thoughtfully. "Tyson will cry," I predicted. "Paige will scream. And then she will try to lie her way out of handcuffs." I watched the floor indicator on the wall of the lobby. The numbers started climbing, going up. I raised my glass to the empty lobby, to the fleeing loan sharks, to the justice riding up a shaft of steel at 5 meters per second. "Here is to accountability," I whispered. The elevator hit 60. Now we wait for the scream. The elevator doors slid open on the 60th floor with a soft chime that sounded like a dinner bell for vultures. Detective Miller and his team stepped out, their hands resting near their holsters. Not because they expected a firefight, but because they knew desperate people did desperate things. I stood by the window, swirling the last dregs of wine in my glass, watching the finale begin. Tyson was huddled in the corner near the pile of garbage that used to be his life. When he saw the badges, he didn't stand up. He curled tighter into himself, a child hiding from the monsters under the bed. But Paige was different. She was a fighter, a dirty, cornered rat of a fighter. She saw the handcuffs on Miller's belt, and her eyes went wide. She lunged for the service stairs, but my head of security, a man named Marcus, who had served 3 tours in the Marines and 10 years on my loading docks, stepped into her path. Marcus didn't say a word. He just crossed his arms. He was 6'5" of solid muscle and scar tissue. Paige bounced off him like a bird hitting a windshield. "Get out of my way!" she shrieked, clawing at his jacket. "You cannot touch me. This is my house. I am a resident." Detective Miller stepped forward, his voice calm and bored. "Paige Jefferson, you are under arrest for credit card fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. You have the right to remain silent, and I suggest you use it because your voice is giving me a headache." He grabbed her wrist. The click of the handcuffs was the sweetest sound I had heard in 40 years. It was sharper than the sound of money-counting machines. It was the sound of accountability. Paige started to thrash. She kicked Miller in the shin. She spit at Marcus. She screamed profanities that would make a sailor blush. "Tyson, help me," she wailed. "Don't let them take me. Do something, you coward." Tyson looked up. His face was a mask of snot and tears. He looked at me, then at his wife. He stood up on shaky legs. "Dad," he whispered. "Dad, please. They are hurting her. You can't let this happen. Call Mr. Sharp. Pay them off. Do something." I looked at my son. Even now, after everything, he was still trying to save her. He was still the weak boy who let others fight his battles. I nodded to Marcus. "Remove him," I said. Marcus moved. He didn't grab Tyson roughly. He grabbed him efficiently. He took Tyson by the collar of his suit jacket and the belt of his trousers and lifted him off the ground like a sack of flour. "No," Tyson shouted, flailing his limbs. "I live here. I signed the lease. You can't evict me." "You breached the contract, son," I said, sipping my wine. "Clause 89. Criminal activity on the premises voids the residency agreement immediately. Your wife just brought the police to my doorstep. You are trespassing." Marcus marched him toward the elevator. Detective Miller was dragging a screaming Paige right behind him. The procession of failure was moving toward the exit. I thought it was over. I thought the show was done. But Paige had one more card to play. One final lie she had kept in her back pocket for a moment just like this. She dug her heels into the concrete floor. She threw her head back and let out a scream that stopped everyone in their tracks. "I am pregnant," she howled. The echo bounced off the bare walls. "I am pregnant," she sobbed, her body going limp in Miller's grip so he had to hold her up. "You cannot arrest a pregnant woman. You are hurting the baby. My baby. Tyson's baby." Tyson stopped struggling in Marcus's grip. He twisted his head around, his eyes wide with a sudden desperate hope. "Pregnant," he gasped. "Paige, you are pregnant." "Yes," she cried, tears streaming down her face, mixing with her ruined mascara. "I found out yesterday. I was going to tell you tonight. It is a miracle, Tyson. The doctor said the surgery failed. We are having a baby. A son." She looked at me. Her eyes were pleading, but underneath the tears I saw the calculation. She was gambling everything on my legacy. She knew I wanted a grandson. She knew Beatrice had wanted the family name to carry on. "Silas, please," she begged. "It is your grandson, your blood. You cannot let your grandchild be born in a prison cell. Think of the legacy. Think of Beatrice." The mention of my wife made my jaw tighten. She dared to speak her name. Tyson broke free from Marcus's grip. Marcus let him go, looking at me for instructions. Tyson ran to Paige, falling to his knees beside her. He put his hands on her stomach. "A baby," he whispered. "A little boy. Dad, did you hear that? A grandson." He looked up at me, and for the first time I saw a spark of life in him. A spark of purpose. "Dad, this changes everything," he said, his voice gaining strength. "We can fix this. I will get a job. I will work. I will do anything. Just pay the bail. Get her a lawyer. Do it for the baby. Do it for the Jefferson name." The room was silent. Detective Miller looked uncomfortable. Even police officers hesitated when a baby was involved. Paige was sobbing softly now, leaning into Tyson, playing the victim perfectly. It was a good performance. A masterful performance. If I hadn't been Silas Jefferson, if I hadn't spent my life anticipating supply chain disruptions and vendor lies, I might have paused. But I was Silas Jefferson, and I verified everything. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I felt the crisp edge of the paper Mr. Sharp had handed me this morning, along with the eviction notice. I walked toward them. My footsteps were slow, deliberate. I stopped 3 feet away. I looked down at the touching family tableau, the weeping mother, the protective father. It was a beautiful lie. "Get up, Tyson," I said. He shook his head, clutching Paige's waist. "No, I am not leaving her. She is carrying my child." I pulled the folded paper from my pocket. I snapped it open. "She is carrying a child," I agreed. "That part is true. The medical report from the clinic confirms high HCG levels. The tubal ligation did fail." "Nature finds a way." Tyson smiled through his tears. "See, Dad, it is a miracle. But I continued, my voice dropping the temperature in the room by 10 degrees. She isn't carrying your child. Paige stopped crying instantly. Her breath hitched. I held the paper out so Tyson could see it. It wasn't just a pregnancy confirmation. It was a prenatal paternity test. Non-invasive. Done with a blood sample she gave last week during a routine checkup, a checkup paid for by my insurance, which meant I had access to the portal. Mr. Sharp has a very aggressive team of investigators, I said. When we saw the pregnancy marker, we got curious. We got a sample. A sample. Paige whispered, her face draining of blood. From your hairbrush, I said. And from Tyson's razor. I pointed to the results on the page. Probability of paternity for Tyson Jefferson 0%, I read aloud. Tyson stared at the paper. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't blink. Then he whispered. Who is it? I turned the page. We ran a cross-reference, I said, with the DNA of known associates. We found a match. I looked at Paige. She was shaking her head, mouthing the word no over and over. It seems your wife has been very active at her gym, I said, specifically with her personal trainer. A man named Kyle, Kyle Tyson said. The guy with the ponytail, the guy you said was gay. He is not gay, I said. And he is very fertile. I dropped the paper. It floated down, landing on Tyson's lap. My grandson does not have the genes of a man who wears spandex for a living, I said, my voice cold and final. My legacy is not going to be carried by a bastard conceived in a Planet Fitness parking lot. Tyson picked up the paper. He read it. He read the name. Kyle. He looked at Paige. He didn't scream this time. He didn't yell. He just made a sound like a dying animal, a low, keening wail that came from the bottom of his soul. You are pregnant with the gym teacher's baby, he whispered. Paige tried to grab him. Tyson, it doesn't matter. We can raise him as ours. Silas will never know. I know now, I said. Tyson pushed her away. He pushed her hard. She fell back into Detective Miller's arms. Get her away from me, Tyson said. His voice was dead. Get her out of my sight. Detective Miller nodded. He pulled Paige toward the elevator. She started screaming again, screaming at me, screaming at Tyson, screaming at God. You ruined my life, Silas, she shrieked as the doors opened. I hope you rot in hell. I watched her go. I watched the golden doors slide shut, cutting off her voice. I looked at Tyson. He was sitting on the floor holding the paternity test. He wasn't crying anymore. He was just staring at nothing. Marcus stepped forward. Mr. Jefferson. I nodded. Take him, I said. Marcus reached down and hauled Tyson up. Tyson didn't fight. He was a rag doll. He had no fight left. His wife was gone. His money was gone. His child was a lie. He looked at me as Marcus dragged him toward the elevator. Dad, he whispered. What do I do? I looked at him. I saw the fear. I saw the total, absolute destruction of the man he thought he was. You learn, I said. The elevator doors opened. Marcus shoved him inside. You learn to start over, I said. Or you don't. The doors closed. I was alone. I stood in the center of the empty penthouse. The sun had set. The city lights were coming on below me, a sea of diamonds in the darkness. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. I felt a strange sense of peace. The cancer had been cut out. The wound would bleed for a while, but it would heal. I walked over to the window and placed my hand on the cold glass. Goodbye, son, I whispered to the empty room. But the night wasn't over. There was one more act to this tragedy. Because when you strip a man of everything, he either dies or he becomes something else. And I needed to see what Tyson would become. It was 2 hours later when the call came from the front desk. The concierge sounded uncomfortable, his voice dropping to a whisper as if he were reporting a stray dog soiling the pristine sidewalk. He told me there was a man outside. He said the man claimed to be my son, but he looked like a vagrant. He asked if he should call the police to remove him from the premises. I told him to wait. I took the service elevator down. I didn't want to give Tyson the satisfaction of seeing me step out of the golden lift he had coveted so desperately just hours before. I wanted to approach him from the ground level, man to man. When I walked into the lobby, I saw him through the glass revolving doors. He was sitting on the curb, his head in his hands. His expensive suit jacket was gone, probably lost or sold. His white shirt was torn at the shoulder and stained with city grime. He was shivering not from the cold, but from the shock of a reality that had hit him like a freight train. I pushed through the doors and the noise of the city rushed in. Sirens honking horns, the shouting of pedestrians. Tyson looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. He looked at me, and for the first time in his life, he didn't look entitled. He looked broken. "Where is she?" I asked. I didn't need to say her name. Tyson let out a laugh that sounded like a dry cough. "She left Dad. She didn't even make it to the corner." He wiped his nose with the back of his hand, smearing dirt across his face. As soon as the police let us go, as soon as they realized she wasn't actually pregnant and the fraud charges needed a federal prosecutor to stick, they released us on our own recognizance pending a hearing. We walked out of the precinct. I tried to talk to her. I tried to tell her we could figure it out. He looked down at his scuffed Italian leather shoes. A car pulled up, he whispered. A red convertible. It was Kyle, the gym trainer, the father. He looked up at me, his eyes filling with fresh tears. "She didn't even look at me, Dad. She just hopped in the front seat. She threw her wedding ring into the gutter and told me I was dead weight. She said she does not do broke men." And then they drove away. I watched him crumble. The woman he had destroyed his relationship with me for the woman he had stolen for had discarded him the moment his utility ran out. It was a harsh lesson, but a necessary one. "I have nowhere to go. Dad," he said, his voice trembling. "My keycard doesn't work. My credit cards are declined. I have $12 in my pocket. I can't even get a motel room. Please let me back in. I will sleep on the floor. I will sleep in the bathtub. Just don't leave me out here." I looked at my son, this 32-year-old man who had never spent a night without a roof over his head, who had never wondered where his next meal was coming from. He was finally tasting the fear that drove men to greatness or to madness. "Get up," I said. He stood up, swaying slightly. He looked at the revolving doors, hope flickering in his eyes. "Thank you, Dad," he breathed. "I knew you wouldn't abandon me." I didn't move toward the door. I stood my ground, blocking his path. "I am not abandoning you, Tyson," I said. "But I am not saving you either, not in the way you think." I reached into the canvas tote bag I had brought down with me. It was an old bag, grease-stained and sturdy. I pulled out a bundle of gray fabric. It was heavy stiff with starch. I threw it at him. It hit him in the chest and he scrambled to catch it before it hit the dirty sidewalk. He unfolded it, confused. It was a jumpsuit, a gray industrial jumpsuit with a patch on the breast pocket. The patch read, "Millennium Tower Maintenance." "What is this?" Tyson asked, looking from the uniform to me. "It is your new wardrobe," I said. I pointed to the service entrance around the corner of the building, a steel door that led to the boiler rooms and the trash compactors. "You want to live in this building?" I asked. "You want to stay at the Millennium Tower?" "Fine. You can stay." Tyson stared at the jumpsuit, his hands shaking. "Dad, I don't understand." I took a step closer, getting right in his face. "I spoke to the building superintendent while you were at the police station," I said. "I told him I knew a guy who needed work, a guy who was desperate, a guy who had a lot of debt to pay off." Tyson recoiled as if I had slapped him. "You want me to work here?" he whispered. "As a janitor." "Not a janitor," I corrected. "A porter. The lowest rung on the ladder, son. You start in the basement. You clean the grease traps in the restaurant kitchens. You sort the recycling. You scrub the loading dock when the garbage trucks leak." "I am a Jefferson." Tyson stammered, his old pride trying to claw its way out of the grave. "I have a degree. I am an entrepreneur. I cannot scrub floors. People will see me. Paige might see me." "Paige is gone," I snapped. "And your degree is worth less than the paper it is printed on because you never used it. You wanted to be a big shot, Tyson. You wanted to sign contracts. Well, you signed one. You signed a liability agreement that makes you responsible for $2 million. I pointed a finger at his chest, right over where his heart beat beneath the torn shirt. "You have two choices right now. Option A is you turn around and walk away. You go sleep under a bridge. You let the loan sharks find you. You let the banks sue you. You starve." Tyson swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. "And option B," he asked, his voice barely audible over the traffic. "Option B is, you put on that suit," I said. "You walk through that service door. You report to Mr. Hernandez, the head custodian. He knows who you are. He knows you are my son. And he knows that if you show up 5 minutes late, or if you complain once, he is to fire you immediately." I paused, letting the weight of the offer sink in. The pay is minimum wage. Every cent of it will be garnished to pay the interest on the penthouse debt. You will sleep in the on-call room in the sub-basement. It is a cot and a sink. It is not the 60th floor, but it is dry and it is safe. Tyson looked at the uniform in his hands. He ran his thumb over the rough fabric. He looked at the gleaming glass tower that soared above us, the tower he thought he would rule. Now he was being offered a place in its bowels. "You are humiliating me," he said, tears spilling onto the gray cloth. "You are doing this to break me." I shook my head. "I am doing this to build you," I said, my voice dropping to a rough whisper. "You have been broken for a long time, Tyson. You were broken by easy money and soft living. You were broken by a woman who saw you as a mark. You have no spine because you never had to stand up." I grabbed his shoulder. My grip was hard. "Work is not humiliation, son. Work is dignity. Cleaning a floor is honest. Paying your debts is honest. Taking responsibility for your stupidity is the most honorable thing a man can do." I let him go. "So what is it going to be, Tyson? The bridge or the basement? Decide. Now." Tyson stood there on the busy street corner. People walked past us, businessmen in suits, tourists with cameras. They looked at the disheveled man crying, holding a janitor's uniform, and the stern old man staring him down. They didn't know the stakes. They didn't know a soul was being weighed on the sidewalk. Tyson looked at the street. He looked at the darkening sky. He looked at the life he was losing. Then he took a deep, ragged breath. He unbuttoned his torn dress shirt. He stripped it off right there on the street, exposing his pale chest to the cold wind. He dropped the ruined shirt in the gutter. He stepped into the gray jumpsuit. He pulled it up over his legs, over his waist. He slid his arms into the sleeves. He zipped it up. It fit him. It fit him better than the Italian suit ever did, because this was real. He looked at me. He didn't look defiant anymore. He looked terrified. He looked small, but he was standing. "Where do I go?" he asked, his voice dull. "Around the corner," I said, pointing. "The gray door. Knock twice. Ask for Hernandez. Tell him you are ready to work." Tyson nodded. He wiped his face with the rough sleeve of the uniform. He turned away from me. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't say "I love you." He just started walking. He walked past the main entrance with its golden revolving doors. He walked past the doorman who sneered at him. He walked around the corner toward the trash cans and the delivery trucks. I watched him go. I watched my son, the boy I had dreamed would be a CEO, a leader, a king, walk into the darkness of the service alley to scrub garbage cans. My heart ached. It ached with a sharp physical pain that almost brought me to my knees. I wanted to run after him. I wanted to pull out my checkbook and fix it all. I wanted to buy him a new suit and take him to dinner. But I stayed planted on the sidewalk. I forced myself to watch until he disappeared into the gray door, because saving him now would be killing him. He had to die in that basement so that a man could be born. I turned back to the lobby. The doorman opened the door for me, smiling deferentially. "Welcome back, Mr. Jefferson," he said. I nodded. I walked to the elevator. I pressed the button for the 60th floor. I was going back to the empty penthouse. I was going to stand on the balcony and look down at the city. I had won the war. I had defeated the enemies at the gate. I had exiled the traitor. But as the elevator rose, I realized that victory didn't taste sweet. It tasted like ash. It tasted like the dust of a demolished life. But it was necessary. It was the only way. Tyson was scrubbing floors now, and for the first time in 32 years I was proud of him. Not because he had succeeded, but because he had finally started. The wind on the 60th floor was not like the wind on the street. It was cleaner, but it was sharper. It cut through my suit jacket and bit into my skin like a reminder that I was mortal. I stood on the balcony of the penthouse, leaning against the railing, looking down at the city of Seattle. From up here, the cars looked like blood cells moving through the veins of a concrete beast. The lights of the skyscrapers shimmered $1 billion of electricity burning against the night. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that rings in your ears. I had won. That was the objective truth. I had neutralized the threat. I had evicted the parasites. I had secured my legacy. By all metrics of war, I was the victor standing on the hill surrounded by the wreckage of my enemies. But victory did not taste like champagne. It tasted like cold coffee and regret. I looked at my hands. They were the same hands that had signed the contracts, the same hands that had thrown the clothes, the same hands that had built a fortune. They were trembling slightly. Not from age, but from the adrenaline crash. I had destroyed my son. I knew it was necessary. I knew it was the only way to save him from himself. But knowing it did not make it feel good. A surgeon knows he has to cut open a chest to fix a heart, but he still has to break the ribs. I had broken Tyson's ribs. I had stripped him of his dignity, his marriage, and his illusions. I had sent him into the basement to scrub the filth of other people. I turned away from the view. The penthouse was still a raw shell behind me. The wind whistled through the unfinished space. It felt like a tomb. A very expensive, very high-altitude tomb. I walked back inside. The pile of Tyson's garbage was still there in the middle of the floor. The broken TV, the stained sofa. It looked like the aftermath of a natural disaster. I sat down on a folding chair I had brought up. I poured myself a glass of water from a plastic bottle. "Beatrice," I whispered to the empty room, "I hope you can forgive me." I could almost hear her voice. She would have cried. She would have begged me to stop. She was soft where I was hard. She was the cushion, and I was the wall. But she wasn't here. And because she wasn't here, Tyson had grown soft. He had never hit the wall. Until tonight. I sat there for hours until the sun began to bleed over the horizon, painting the concrete walls in shades of orange and gray. I didn't sleep. I just watched the light change. I thought about the boy who used to run to me when he scraped his knee. I thought about the man who had tried to steal my money. I had to kill the boy to save the man. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. Harder than the riots, harder than the recession, harder than burying my wife. But as the morning light hit the floor, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, I felt a resolve settle in my chest. The pain was the price of the cure, and I was willing to pay it. 1 year had passed since that night. The penthouse was no longer a shell. It was no longer a tomb. I walked through the main room. The concrete floor had been polished and sealed, gleaming with a warm industrial sheen. The walls were painted a crisp, clean white. There were no crystal chandeliers or Italian marble statues. Instead, there were long wooden tables, ergonomic chairs, and whiteboards covered in diagrams and flowcharts. The penthouse was not a home. It was headquarters. I had renamed it the Beatrice Jefferson Initiative. It was a non-profit incubator. I used my money, the money Tyson and Paige had tried to steal, to fund young entrepreneurs from the neighborhoods where I grew up. Kids who had ideas but no capital. Kids who knew how to work but didn't have the connections. I walked past a group of young coders arguing passionately about a logistics algorithm. They nodded at me with respect, not because I was rich, but because I was the guy who gave them a shot. I walked to my office in the corner. It was glass-walled simple. I sat at my desk and pulled up the building security feed on my monitor. I didn't watch the stock market. I didn't watch the news. I watched Channel 4, the camera feed for the sub-basement and the loading dock. And there he was. Tyson. He looked different. The bloat was gone. The softness around his jawline had been carved away by 12 months of physical labor. He had lost 30 pounds. His hair was cut short, practical. He was wearing the gray jumpsuit. It was stained with grease and sweat, but it was fitted. He wore it like armor. He was pushing a heavy cart full of recycling bins toward the compactor. He moved with a rhythm. He didn't drag his feet. He planted his boots and pushed using his legs, not his back. He moved like a man who understood leverage. He stopped to wipe his forehead with a rag. He looked tired, deeply tired, but his eyes were clear. There was no fog of entitlement, no glaze of unearned expectation. I zoomed in on the image. A delivery driver was trying to back a truck into a tight bay. He was struggling, grinding the gears. The old Tyson would have laughed. The old Tyson would have filmed it and mocked the man. The new Tyson stepped forward. He signaled the driver. He used hand motions, guiding the truck in with precision. He helped the man unload a heavy pallet. They shook hands. The driver offered him a cigarette. Tyson declined, but he smiled. It was a real smile. Not the salesman grin he used to wear. It was the smile of a man who knew he was useful. My chest tightened. He was still paying off the debt. Every week, Mr. Sharp garnished his wages. It would take him another 10 years at this rate. He lived in a small studio apartment in Queens, now a place he paid for himself. He took the subway. He cooked his own meals. He hadn't asked me for a dime in 365 days. He was a janitor. He was a porter. He was a nobody in the eyes of the people who lived in the penthouse suites below mine. But to me, he looked like a king. He had started taking night classes, logistics management. He was reading the textbooks I had left on his pillow in the on-call room. He was learning the business from the bottom up, the way I did. Paige was gone. She was in Arizona. I heard running some scam involving essential oils. She had sent divorce papers 6 months ago. Tyson had signed them without reading them, just like he signed the liability contract. But this time, he signed them because he didn't care about what he was losing. He knew he had already lost the only thing that mattered, which was his self-respect, and he was busy earning it back. I watched him finish his shift. He clocked out. He walked toward the exit, not with the swagger of a fake millionaire, but with the stride of a man who had put in an honest day. I wanted to go down there. I wanted to tell him. I wanted to say I was proud. But not yet. The lesson wasn't finished. The steel was still being forged. If I pulled him out of the fire now, he would be brittle. He needed more heat. He needed more time. I sat back in my chair. The sun was setting over the city, turning the sky into fire. I looked at the camera feed one last time. Tyson was walking out of the service door into the dusk. He stopped and looked up. He looked all the way up to the 60th floor. He couldn't see me. The glass was tinted, but he knew I was there. He didn't wave. He didn't flip me off. He just nodded. A short, sharp nod of acknowledgement. A soldier saluting his general. Then he turned and walked toward the subway station. I did not smile. My face remained impassive, etched with the lines of my own hard life. I simply nodded back at the screen. Love is not giving people what they want, I thought. Love is giving them what they need, and sometimes what a son needs is for his father to be the villain. I reached out and turned off the monitor. The screen went black, reflecting my own face in the darkness. I looked old. I looked tired. But my eyes were bright. I had saved him. I had broken his heart. I had ruined his life. And I had saved him. The Beatrice Jefferson Initiative was bustling outside my door. The future was being built in my living room. And down in the basement, the legacy was being scrubbed clean one floor at a time. I stood up and walked to the window. The city lights were coming on. "It is a beautiful view, Beatrice," I whispered. "You would have loved it." And for the first time in a year, I truly believed she would have. The screen fades to black. We often mistake enabling for love, thinking that shielding our children from the world's harshness is our duty. But I learned that by cushioning every fall, I wasn't protecting my son. I was crippling him. Wealth without work is a poison that rots the soul, creating entitlement instead of character. True love sometimes requires us to play the villain, to stand back and let those we care about hit rock bottom. It was only when Tyson lost everything, his pride, his comfort, and his false safety net, that he finally found the dignity of earning his own way. If you agree that sometimes the hardest lessons are the most necessary, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice served cold. Let me know in the comments. Do you think Tyson deserved a second chance, or should I have left him on the street? See you in the next story.